You're watching the Batter Fans Network.
Welcome, everybody, to night one of the MLS season preview 2025. I am your host, Daniel Granada, and tonight we'll be previewing the bottom of the table, the bottom 9 teams in 2024, and obviously they're hoping to move up. We're going to have 9 different content creators jumping in with us, and every 20 minutes. So we're going to start with Philadelphia. 20 minutes later, we're going to have somebody else jump in, and we're going to keep going, rocking and rolling the rest of the night. So I hope you guys join us, and if you have any questions in the chat as you jump in, feel free to ask them as we move on. So without any further ado, let me bring on my first guest, Mr. Todd the God Lewis. 15 minutes. What's going on, Todd?
Nothing much, Danny. Excited to join you on this snowy evening here in Maryland. So you guys don't know about that down in Central Florida, right? So
No, it's nice and sunny out here.
Excited to talk about what was the 2024 season for the Philadelphia Union and what's to come for 2025.
All right, so let's get rocking and rolling with the preview. So Philadelphia Union, 2024, 9-10-15, 37 points. They were 12th in the Eastern Conference. They put up 62 goals, which is pretty. I mean, they had a good attack, but obviously low on the defense. They allowed 55 goals. Just an overall recap of the Philadelphia Union last year, Jim Curtin's final season.
Yeah, I mean, disappointing year for the Union. They missed the playoffs for the first time since 2017, and it was a disappointing year all around. I mean, you have the firing of Jim Curtin. You have Andre Blake, who missed over 50% of the season due to injuries. You had other injuries mixed in there, and yeah, a lot of goals scored, 62 in the league, but you conceded 55, which was disappointing. This is unlike the Philadelphia Union teams of the past, and you know, when you concede a lot of goals, you're not going to do well throughout the season. And yeah, the Union, a lot of times they just continue to concede first, or they would concede consecutive goals, and they only won 4 games at Subaru Park last season. And if you can't win your home games, then you're sure as hell not going to make the playoffs. And that's exactly what happened with the Philadelphia Union last year. And we've seen this team make Subaru Park a fortress over the last 5-6 seasons. And last year, you know, teams came into Subaru Park, weren't afraid at all, and just steamrolled the Union at home. And disappointing year. And your Inter Miami team, you know, took advantage of that. They're down 2 men and beat the Union 2-1 last couple minutes of the game. I mean, that's really, really disappointing. And that's a season that Philadelphia Union fans want to forget. But you know, 1 to 2025, and I think there's a lot of optimism within the fan base.
They missed the playoffs by 3 points, but they lost the final 3 games. So they were alive up until the very end. So I mean, it wasn't necessarily a horrible season by any means. But moving forward now in 2024, Jim Curtin is no longer there. How are you feeling about his replacement?
Well, Bradley Cornell. I don't know, right? I mean, he was an interim manager at New York Red Bulls and guided them to the playoffs. Then they replaced Bradley Cornell, and Bradley Cornell goes to St. Louis City. And yeah, we all know that St. Louis had a fantastic season in 2023, their inaugural year, where they finished first place, and then they get steamrolled by Sporting Kansas City in the playoffs. And you could see that the wheels started to maybe fall off towards the end of the season for St. Louis. And then 2024, Bradley Cornell, halfway through the year, winds up getting fired by St. Louis. And I think when you look at his coaching resume, he doesn't have a ton of experience. And you replace a 2-time MLS Coach of the Year with a manager that's not had the longevity that Jim Curtin's had, but it makes a lot of sense to me because their sporting director, Ernst Tanner, came from the Red Bull system. Ernst Tanner was appointed in 2018, midway through the season in August, September, I believe it was. And it was always odd when Ernst Tanner decided to keep Jim Curtin on board when he took over as sporting director, because usually, and this isn't just in soccer, this is all pro sports, you always see the sporting director, the GM, bring in their own manager. And so it was always a little bit odd to see that, look, he decided to roll with Jim Curtin, and Jim Curtin, you know, bought into Ernst Tanner's system, his style of play, playing a 4-4-2, diamond press formation. And yeah, those two had a wonderful working relationship, it seemed. And then things started to deteriorate in the 2024 season. And now Ernst Tanner goes out and gives a chance to Bradley Carnell, a guy who I said comes from the Red Bull system as well. More aligns with Ernst Tanner's philosophy, how they both want to play soccer. So yeah, we'll see what Bradley Carnell can do here in 2025.
Now, I know you guys lost Julian Carranza, Damian Lowe last year, but this offseason, were there any big departures that you're going to miss the most?
Yeah, I would say Jim Curtin. I mean, again, just a two-time MLS Coach of the Year candidate. I mean, he led this team to the MLS Cup final in 2022 against LAFC. And I think I want to make a point to the listeners here, right? The Union are one of the lowest spending teams in MLS. And to take a roster that he did to the MLS Cup finals in 2022 to get this team the success they had throughout his tenure here with Ernst Tanner, Jim Curtin, I think, will forever be a hero in Philadelphia. Will always be looked at as a positive, no matter how bad the 2024 season went. And a beloved coach from Philadelphia. It's hard. I feel bad for Bradley Carnell in that sense, where it's hard to replace a coach that's been here for 10 plus years and a hometown hero, and not going to have that relationship with the fans that Jim Curtin did have. So, it's a tough situation for Bradley Carnell to come into. But yeah, I mean, just the longevity that Jim Curtin brought, the buy-in from the players that he brought, never threw his players under the bus once, even though there was moments when he could have. And the one good thing I can say about Bradley Carnell here early on in the season is that he seems to be good with the media, just like Jim Curtin was, answers questions well, is friendly to talk to. And I think that was the biggest concern here in the media and in the fan base too. What kind of manager were you going to get in Bradley Carnell? How would he approach the media? How is he going to approach the fan base? And so I think we can already check off one of those, and he's good with the media. So we'll see what happens come game time. But maybe some people in the fan base would say it's a little bit concerning. 3 games in the preseason, only 2 goals scored, and all 3 losses for the Union.
Not the way we want to start. Any big arrival? I know Jovic, Lukic.
Yeah, Jovan Lukic, I would say, is probably the biggest arrival. There's reports out here that the Union are finalizing a deal to sign Bruno Damiani from Nashville in Uruguay. And he was on loan last season with Boston Rivers, scored 12 goals last year for the club. And yeah, I mean, I think this is what the Union wanted. There's reports out there that the Union are playing $3.4 million, which would be a club record fee. There's also a 20% sell-on clause going back to Nashville. So this is a big statement here by the Union. They needed another forward, and I do think it's intriguing that you now have 3 good options that you can rotate up top with Mikel Ua, Ty Baribo, and now Damiani. And yeah, I think the roster is pretty much set. The Union also just today announced the arrival of Eddie Davis, who was with Union 2 last year. They gave him a homegrown contract. And now once they make the signing of Bruno official, the Union will have all 30 roster spots filled up. As fans will know, 30 is the max spots you can have. You can have 31 spots, but that player has to be loaned out to a lower division squad. So 30 is the max that the team can have. And yeah, I'll be interested to see what the Union do in terms of loaning out more players. Do they sell anybody? Like you had mentioned, Julian Carranza, Jose Martinez, Damian Lowe were sold halfway through last season. Leon Flock leaves on a free this year. You see Jack Elliott leave to go to Chicago Fire. But yeah, like I said, I think Jim Curtin was the biggest departure. And then you look at the arrivals. Yeah, I would say Lukic. Because the Union needed a strong tackler of the ball in the midfield. They needed somebody to protect that back line. Again, going back to your point, Danny, 55 goals conceded. That's not good enough for the Union. Danley John Jock, they brought in halfway through the season too. I view him more as an 8 than a 6. With Bradley Carnell, the Union looked to be playing a 4-2-2 formation, which is typical of a Red Bull team, right? I mean, and that's transitioned from offense to defense into a 4-3-1. So yeah, it's curious to see, how the 4-2-2 looks compared to the 4-4-2 diamond. I think there's going to be a lot of similarities, but yeah, the pressing cues may be a little bit different. But I would say again, Jovan Lukic, biggest addition to this team officially.
And the team still goes as Gazdag goes.
Yeah, right. I mean, he scored a ton of goals last year, and it is going to be curious to see how he fits into the system playing the 4-2-2, right? Where those two outside attacking tens are going to be more so, not looking centrally of the field, where Daniel Gazdag was essentially playing as a second striker, where he would drop deep, get on the ball, start the play, and then make those late runs into the box and just clean up the scraps, the
He's
loose
playing like
balls.
a true number 10.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it will be interesting to see how Daniel Gazdag adapts to this new role. But again, I mean, you got to get goals, and for me, the biggest concerning thing in preseason is not really seeing the offense gel right now, not connecting a lot of chances. And you mentioned 62 goals last year, a lot of goals scored, I believe, the sixth or seventh most scored last year in MLS, and so. Hopefully the goals are still there. I mean, they have players, Mikael Uhre, Ty Berube, Daniel Gazdag. That's a good amount of goals
7
that
goals.
you have. And so you hope that they can continue to bring in the goals. But I look, where else are they going to get the goals, right? Quinn Sullivan had a good year last year. Lukic and Danley John Jock, the 2 6s, I don't expect them to add a lot of goals. What about coming off the bench? Kevin Sullivan, maybe?
Well, I mean, I guess that leads into player to watch, because I already saw in the chat somebody asking, what do you guys expect from Kevin Sullivan?
He'll play more than last season, which was barely any, but I expect him to play more so with Union 2 like he did last year, play more minutes this year. I wouldn't expect him to be a starter. But again, I mean, his contract runs out after the 2028 season, and it's better to
Man City he goes.
Yeah, exactly. It's better to see what you have before it's too late. But watching him in the 3 preseason games that he's played so far, they played against 2 European opponents in Spain, and then they played against FC Cincinnati last Friday. And from watching the games, it seems like he's holding his own. I mean, definitely going to get bodied off the ball every now and then, but yeah, I think a lot of fans, MLS is going to tell you that Kevin Sullivan's one to watch. But for me, I would say it's Quinn Sullivan, his brother, Kevin's brother. I think, again, breakout season for Quinn last year. Can he add on to that? It's going to be interesting seeing him again playing in that 4-2-2. I know I keep repeating myself, but it's a new formation. Quinn Sullivan was a natural winger coming through the Union system. Last year, he found a lot of success in that 8 role, just playing a little bit out wide. So I'm curious to see what kind of season Quinn Sullivan can have. Can he outdo his season he had last year for the Union? Hopefully he can. The system, high press, is exactly what Quinn Sullivan's built for. And every single season, he always wins that pace tester test for the Union. Always the most fit player coming into preseason, always the most fit player in the season. So I think Quinn Sullivan's going to be one to watch here.
As far as strengths and weaknesses go, your strength, Kyle Wagner coming up the left side. I would assume you're going to be building off the left as usual. What would you say is the strength on this team?
Yeah, the strength. I mean, you bring back Andre Blake, who's been one of the best goalkeepers in the league the last couple of years. Can he stay healthy? That's a big question there. Kai Wagner, there's always rumors every single year. Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? There was more rumors this year. Is he going to go to Italy? Is he going to go to Spain? Is he going to go to the English second division? And look, Kai Wagner's still here, and so that's a big part of the Union's success. So I would say, yeah, you're returning Andre Blake, Kai Wagner, big pieces. Bringing in Lukic, I think protecting that back line is going to be huge. In terms of weaknesses, though, you have a lot of young guys on this roster. A lot of homegrown guys were given contracts last year, more homegrown deals given out this year. And, there's questions with Glavinovic, the young Argentine center back they got from Newell's Old Boys. They got him on loan. Macania, you have Nelson Pierre, 3 unproven center backs in this league, 3 young guys in this league. How do they do? Then, of course, you have your David Vasquez's, your CJ Olney's, your Kevin Sullivan's, Frankie Westfield's, a lot of young players. And so the Union are brought back a good core group of the guys with Mikael Uhre, Ty Berube. Bedoya is back again for another season.
Why?
Still here. Why is Bedoya back? Leadership. It's a young squad.
Isn't he like 50 though?
Yeah, he's 37. But I mean, again, the weaknesses, all these young guys are so unproven. And so bringing in that leadership, a veteran that's been here, done that, and to really just help these guys adjust to being pros, I think that's why you bring back Alejandro Bedoya. And we'll see. Will this be Bedoya's last season? But yeah, just a lot of unproven players on this roster, I think, would be my biggest weakness.
Well, I mean, I was just joking. I love Bedoya. He's kind of Colombian, right? Colombian parents. So shout out to Bedoya. What are the fan expectations coming into this season, coming after this disappointing 2024? Jim Curtin's gone after a million years. Like, what's the fan expectation coming into the season?
Man, it's so hard, Danny, right? If you believe everything you see on social media, then this fan base would make you believe that the sky's falling, that the Union have no chance next season. They're going to miss the playoffs once again. And I was joking with a buddy. I was joking with a buddy the other day where I said, and I'm sure there's the fan base that's not even on social media. And there's some of them when they go to Subaru Park on March 1st for the home opener against Cincinnati, some of them are going to be like, where's Jim Curtin? So, it's hard. It's hard to judge, how this fan base feels, because if you believe everything you see on social media, then they would have you believe that everything's going to fall apart for this team. My personal expectations for this team, I think right now they're a 7-8 team. I do think they'll make the playoffs. Again, I mean, dinner guys like Ty Baribo, Mikel Ua, big guys that are going to get you goals. Kai Wagner, Andre Blake, Jacob Glesnes. Can he get back to being a best of the MLS defenders, best 11 that he was in 2022? I mean, you're still bringing back good guys. Nathan Harriel, who had a phenomenal season once again with the Union. So you have stability back there on the back line. But I think so many teams in MLS, right, this offseason got out and got much better than the Union did, at least on paper.
You guys are in the Leagues Cup.
Nope.
The Open Cup. I'm sorry, the Open Cup. You return to the Open Cup, and that's as much as you're gonna get this year. So, are you gonna put all the eggs in that basket this year?
Well, that's a good question, right? We knew how Jim Curtin felt about the Open Cup, winning it as a former player with the Chicago Fire. And he reached the finals as the head coach of the Philadelphia Union, never winning one. The question is, for me, how does Bradley Cornell feel about that? The Union's May schedule is really, really tight with MLS teams entering the round of 32 play. The Union will host, which is the first time since 2018 at home, I believe it is. I'll have to go back and check my notes. Nobody quote me. But if the Union would win that game, then the next game in the U.S. Open Cup would also fall between May 20 or 21st. And the Union could potentially play 9 games in May with rest days every 3-4 days. So, yeah, busy May schedule. So, I don't know. Did the Union go for U.S. Open Cup? Some people in this fan base hope that they do just because they've had success in the past. But, yeah, I'm not really sure how Bradley Cornell feels about the U.S. Open Cup. It's definitely a question when the time gets closer to ask him.
And then last question. Prediction. What is your prediction? Where does this team end up next year? Do they win the Open Cup? Any chance of the MLS Cup? Where do you think they end up next year?
Man, so early, right? 7-8, like I said, I think they do get into the playoffs. Anything can happen when you get in the playoffs. Just ask Atlanta United.
It should have been last year, yeah.
U.S. Open Cup, I don't think they win that. I don't think that they're going to win MLS Cup. But again, you just never know. So I'll say this is a playoff team, 7-8 seed, top 4. Some people I've seen online say they believe they are. But for me, just watching how much better the East has got, it's hard for me to believe that too much.
I think the East has gotten weaker. Look at Cincinnati lost Lucho Acosta. Columbus lost Cucho Hernandez.
They got all this money, right? And so these teams that always invest money. So, I'm sure Columbus will be just fine. There's reports that Evander is going to go to Cincinnati. I think, they get younger in that regards, replacing Evander with, replacing Acosta with Evander. So.
Yeah, we'll definitely see it. I'm looking forward to talking about Dallas tomorrow night with Joe. We got him talking Dallas. Well, Todd, I appreciate you. You are number 1 in the Marathon MLS previews. Appreciate you taking the time. Please let everybody know where they can find you if they want a much more deeper, in-depth preview and knowledge on Philadelphia Union.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at Free Kick Pod, wherever you get your podcast, The Free Kick. Check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/freekickpod, where I do every single game, goals breakdown, so goals that the Union score, goals that they concede. And then I go live on YouTube doing the podcast as well. Again, youtube.com/freekickpod. And then you can check out my writing, the podcast, and there's videos as well on my Substack, thefreekick.substack.com. Danny, it's been a blast being on here. I'm glad that we kept this within 20 minutes. Look forward to the rest of the show.
Absolutely. And for those of you that are watching, batteredfans.com, if you want to get a Believe shirt, if you're a Philadelphia Union fan, we got you with the Believe Philadelphia Union shirt, and we got one for all the MLS teams. So make sure you check those out. Also, Todd, you are the man. Appreciate you jumping on, being number one, and I'll catch you on the next one.
Say, Disney.
All right. Now, jumping over from Philadelphia on north to New England, I got my man, Greg Johnstone, the most realist last name you'll ever see. What's going on, Johnstone? And you are on mute, sir.
Hot start. All right.
There
My
we
bad.
go.
Nice talking to you, Danny. Great to be talking to you again, and great to have another season of MLS right around the corner.
Absolutely, man. This is the best start of the year. So, Caleb Porter, last year, 2024. Recap. What was 2024 like for the New England Revolution?
Yeah, it was pretty miserable. We didn't score very much. We conceded a lot of goals, and that was pretty much the story throughout the entire year. Caleb Porter, no changes really from 2023 to 2024 between the rosters. So basically, this was Caleb Porter inheriting the team, and it was very clear from the start that this is not the team he wanted. He complained very early on that there were a lot of players that he wanted, but they didn't really have any salary cap room. So they pretty much had a lost year of players that, we kind of knew was leaving towards the end of the year. Henry Kessler, DeJuan Jones shipped out mid-season, which was a bit of a shock. And then at the end of the season, again, about 2/3 of this roster was cleared out. So really they're starting, I'll say fresh or pretty close to fresh as you can be. And it seems like we're in year one of a rebuild, which is a bit weird to say because I think a lot of fans have a bit of a short leash with Caleb Porter after how much of a disaster last year was. Overall, 74 goals conceded in MLS play. Just a horrific season for New England.
It wasn't the worst. It was second worst. But you guys were the worst as far as scoring goals. It was the worst. So that's not a good combination at all.
Yeah, it was. If it was not for the San Jose Earthquakes, the New England Revolution have a really, they'd be the worst team in the league, hands down. They still have a argument for bottom 5 to 10 team of all time. It was a horrific season that was not fun to watch.
Absolutely. All right. So biggest departure in the offseason.
Yeah, they had
Dave Romney.
2-time Defender of the Year for the Revolution. Really a bit of an Iron Man. This wasn't much of a surprise because the Revs traded for Javier Arriaga at the beginning of the season last year, and Romney was actually the one originally benched. They ended up trading Kessler, and Romney made his way back into the lineup. But it was clear that Romney was not someone that Caleb Porter was high on. So he gets shipped out along with Mark Anthony Kaye and Ian Harkes to San Jose to reunite with Bruce Arena, which will be interesting to see if those three players knock it out of the park under Bruce Arena after having a subpar season with Caleb Porter. But Romney probably heads up the list. The rest of them are mostly bench players. I highlighted 2 others. Giacomo Vrioni, who the Revolution had as a designated player. He gets sent to Montreal basically for nothing, $50K in GAM. He was their leading scorer last season, but really was ineffective as a designated player in his 2.5 seasons with the Revs. And then
he's
Esmir,
still getting that DP money, but he's not a DP player for them.
For Montreal, I think he is, yeah. I believe he's still a designated player.
I thought he wasn't. Okay.
Yeah, I believe he's still a designated player with Montreal, and that's part of the reason they took him on, because they have 3 designated player spots. So it's essentially a designated player for free that they don't need to pay a transfer fee for. But Esmir Baraktarovic also sent out to PSV for a high transfer fee of, I believe it was $2.5 to $3 million base. Could go up to $6 million, but he's got a high ceiling too. But in terms of development, his next step was in Europe. So those are the 3 players that were in the lineup significantly last year that the Revolution will miss out on, from at least from a minutes perspective.
Now, in the offseason, I'm going to say biggest arrivals. And I know that what you might say. I will tell you, I think Luca Langoni should, even though he technically got here last year, he's the player that I would be most excited about. But who was the biggest arrival here or acquisition during this offseason?
Yeah, well, I think I'll have to go with Campana up top. The 9 spot has been a real issue for the Revolution since the arrival of Giacomo Vrioni. The Revs sold Adam Buxa a few years ago and brought in Vrioni, and ever since then they've really struggled. So if Campana is able to have a good season with the Revolution where he's efficient, that's going to be a massive help. There are a handful of other players too that are expected to fill in well. Fofana and Ceballos are 2 TAM center backs that they've acquired. So it's going to be interesting to see how they fit in. New to MLS, they're both still young players at 26 and 23 respectively, but it's basically a whole new back line for the Revolution, which is interesting since they conceded 74 goals. It can't be any worse than that. But there's a handful of big arrivals too. I'll also point out Ilya Feingold, who is their U22 right back. Brandon Bai is in a contract year, so Feingold probably the right back of the future. It'll be interesting to see how much of a role he plays for the team. But I will say,
You have a
Langoni,
left back of the future also, don't you?
Peyton Miller, 17 years old. It's going to be interesting to see how he develops. Basically, the reason they traded DeJuan Jones was because they wanted to get Peyton Miller some more minutes too. And apparently this is the best prospect the Revolution have had. A lot of people have hyped him up. There's already talk about European scouts looking at him. He's got a really high ceiling. So it'll be interesting to see how much Peyton Miller gets on the field as well.
As far as the formations that Caleb Porter is going to play, what formation are you guys going to look like? Are going to be putting onto the pitch? And how do you guys play possession ball? What's the tactics on the field like?
Yeah, Caleb Porter seems to really want to play out of the back and play with a lot of possession, which, last year I think guys like Dave Romney and Henry Kessler, he really struggled with, having them as the center back. So, the guys they brought in. Pairing. Yeah, the new TAM pairing, Fofana Ceballos, they look like they're a lot better with the ball at their feet. So they'll probably come out in a 4-2-3-1. That's traditionally the formation the Revs have played. There are so many unknowns with this team because they've brought in, I think, 18 new players that the formation, I would say, is probably a question mark. But they'll probably go with a 4-2-3-1. And as I say, play with a little bit more possession, really want to control the game and build up play, which really they struggled with last year because I think a couple of years ago, Bruce Arena liked to play a little bit more direct, which was a little bit more effective. And I think there was a lot of adjustments, a lot of growing pains going to Caleb Porter's style of play.
I can see that. Maybe you might have already touched on it, but player to watch this upcoming season for anybody that's going to start watching New England now.
Yeah, well, I was going to go into it. Langoni, I think that was a really good shout. Club record transfer fee from Boca Juniors of, I think it was $8 to $9 million last summer. He came in, scored 3 goals for the team in what was, as I say, miserable season last year. Kind of towards the end of the year, not a lot of positive going for the team. So it's kind of hard to take a lot of stock in the end of that year. But Langoni was a bit of a bright spot. I'd also say Alassane Youssef, who was another midseason acquisition that they got a $2 million signing from last year. He was a bit of a beast in the midfield. And so the midfield is also going through a bit of a transformation. Matt Polster is in a contract year. He's been a rock for the Revolution. He also might be in his last year with the Revs. The Revs have brought in Jackson Ewell on a 3-year contract. So it'll be interesting to see how Youssef pairs up with either Ewell or Polster and how they combine those two players.
All right. Now, when it comes to Langoni, Carlos Hill's good to go, right? He's staying. Yes. Because I kept hearing rumblings that he might want out. Now, if you have Carlos Hill there feeding Campana service, I think that is ideal. And that would end up being, we're going to move on to strengths and weaknesses. The attack has to be a strength because with Langoni and Hill building up the right wing and up the middle to Campana, which can finish with his head or with a well-placed ball, Campana could be a steal deal for you guys. What would you consider the strength of this team and possibly the weakness?
Yeah, Carlos Hill, I think, as you mentioned, MVP from 3 years ago. He is getting a little bit older, but still the captain of the team, signed an extension early last year. He's still probably the Revs' best player and is kind of the player they will build around. Obviously, I think adding players around them and some better finishing, that's going to add to his assist output this season. But I'd also say the wingers. We mentioned Langoni. There's also another designated player, Thomas Shankalai, who tore his ACL last year. Towards the end of 2023, I believe he had 6 goals in 12 games or 13 games, something like that. Last year, had a good CONCACAF Champions Cup, but only 2 goals in 12 games before he tore his ACL. So if he's able to return to form coming back from injury, he'll pair nicely along the wings with Langoni, and they're both guys that can easily score. So I think the Carlos Hill and having 2 dangerous attacking wingers will certainly help them out. And then if we want to go to weakness too,
absolutely.
Weakness. I mean, I have to point out the defense. Looking at the 2 center backs, I think they're key players to watch, but there's a lot of unknowns. They're very inexperienced. They're coming into MLS. It's a bit of an odd pairing, 2 guys that have never played together. And then on top of that, you have potentially a 20-year-old right back in Feingold, and then a 17-year-old Peyton Miller. So you have a 17-year-old, 20-year-old, 23-year-old, and a 26-year-old all kind of learning to play with each other. And this is a team that conceded 74 goals last year. So I can't imagine they'll be that bad again. But there's a lot of inexperience, and there's probably going to be some growing pains along that back line. So it'll be interesting to see how much the athleticism can make up for the lack of chemistry along the back line. But I certainly think that back line needed a retooling, but it might take a while for it to get there.
Is Ivičić, is that still the goalkeeper? Is he going to be the starting goalkeeper? You feel confident with Ivičić at the goal?
Yeah, yes. He's a good goalkeeper. I mean, we've been spoiled in New England with Petrovic and Matt Turner.
Turner.
Yeah, we've been spoiled in goal to have phenomenal goalkeeping throughout the year. So Ivičić is definitely a step down, but he had a solid season for the Revs last year. I have no real issues with it, but I will say the Revs brought in Alex Bono from DC United, which I expect him to be the backup, but he's still going to push Ivičić a little bit. Before this, the Revs had Earl Edwards Jr., who was just not a starter. So I think now the Revs have two guys with starting experience in MLS, and if Ivicic's form drops off, I think they have a plan B, whereas before it seemed like they were kind of stuck with Ivičić. But I'm fine with Ivičić. I don't think he's a phenomenal special goalkeeper. I know he's had some really good seasons in Portland. Last year he was suitable for the job, so he's not a weak spot, but I wouldn't highlight him as a strength.
So you guys are a couple years removed from Supporter Shield, and I mean the best record of all time at that point. Mm-hmm. What is the fan expectation going into 2025 now?
Yeah, that seems like so long ago, and really the only thing we had. Oh man, and the only thing we really had clinging on to it was the points record, and that's gone now too. So it's hard to figure out exactly where this team is going to land with all of the changes that they've brought in. I think 18 signings. They're obviously putting a huge emphasis on youth. There are a few signings of players that are 29, 33 that are on one-year contracts, but everyone they signed to a multiple year deal is, I believe, 27 or younger. I think Jackson Yule got the longest. He's the oldest player that got a multi-year deal. So this is a team that seems to be in year one of a rebuild, which indicates to me that they're not shooting for a very high bar here. But it's interesting because I think Caleb Porter is on the hot seat. I think a lot of fans really do not like Caleb Porter and the way he conducted himself in post-game pressers and comments about certain players throughout the year. I think there's a lot of pressure from the fans to have a winning product this year, and I'm not sure they're setting themselves up for success. So it's very interesting to look at the roster and feel it's a bit of a rebuild, but I would think that management and coaching has an incentive to go out and put a winning product out there. So I think my expectations are somewhere around the playoff line for 8th and 9th. I was listening to Todd and you talk about the East and it being a little bit weaker. And, you look at the East from last year too, there was a point where it just didn't seem like any of the teams that were along the playoff line really wanted to go on a run and kind of solidify their spot. Really none of the teams were super out of it. So I think the Revs are going to be a team that's going to get stronger as the year goes on. They still have a designated player spot and a U22 spot to fill. So it's very possible too that there's reinforcements coming in the summer. So I think this is going to be a team that's going to be better at the end of the season than it is the beginning. And I think there's a possibility that they end on a bit of a hot stretch if they play their cards right. But right off the bat, I think there's not enough talent to get by on talent. And I think there's going to be some time for this team to develop with chemistry. So I'm going to put them around the playoff line, but I certainly think they get off to a rocky start, and it'll be interesting to see how Caleb Porter handles it.
How many tournaments are you guys in? You know you're in the Open Cup.
Just Open Cup. Just Open Cup.
Open Cup.
Okay.
Cup. Well, which much like Todd and Philly, are you guys putting all your eggs in that pot?
It'll be interesting to see how they approach it, because again, I think Caleb Porter feels a lot of pressure to win, and I think having only one other competition that they're in, I would imagine that they will try to take it a little bit seriously. The other thing too is there's a lot of young talent on this team, so I think those minutes would be good for Peyton Miller, for Feingold. We also have another player who's 20 years old, Noel Buck, who a few years ago was kind of breaking out, and there were ties to teams from the Premier League that were interested in him. He just went on loan to Southampton's U23 team. With a lot of people expected him to be purchased. It was a loan with a purchase option. Southampton declined to purchase the option, so now Noel Buck has returned with not much of a spot on the team. So we have a young player that at one point they were expecting to sell and make a bit of a profit on. Now they're trying to figure his way out back. So we have a handful of young players that need some minutes, need to find their roles on the team, and need to figure out where their the future on the team is. So I think that's where the U.S. Open Cup comes into play. So I think they'll take it seriously, but I think they certainly will focus on youth. Do I expect them to make a deep run? Probably not. It's the Revs. But I certainly think they'll take it a little bit seriously.
All right, so fandom aside, 2025 prediction, and before you give me your prediction, I think the attack, if Campana can finally wake up without the pressure of Miami on his back, I think he could finally have a good season. Just real quick, Campana said he's going to be in New England for just 1 year, and he's ready to go to Europe. So it's a 1 year. He has no plan to stay in past this next season, but he's going to play his heart out because he wants to make it to Europe.
Yep.
What is a disappointing season for Campana, right? Because I want to know what you feel he needs to do, and two, your realistic prediction of the 2025 season.
Well, what's interesting about Campana is that there's also another player the Revs got on loan from France, Ignatius Ganago, who he's on a 6-month loan that can be extended to 12 months, and then there's also a purchase option. And if they use the purchase option, he's a designated player. But he's a striker. He plays a little bit on the wing, but he can also be a striker. So I'm curious to see if he gets off on a hot start. You mentioned Campana is not exactly a long-term play for the Revolution. If they end up swapping him out of the lineup if he struggles early. So I think a disappointment in the season would be I think he needs to get double-digit goals. I think that's the expectation. The Revs went out and spent $2.5 million in GAM. And you mentioned the talent around him. I mean, I think he has to be a double-digit goal scorer for him to, at the bare minimum, to be a success.
I set the over/under at 15.5. That has to be the mark, right?
I would say that's a realistic expectation. I maybe set the under a little bit, 13.5, just because I think I'm a little more pessimistic. But yeah, it's somewhere in the mid-teens, I think, is a fair assessment. And again, with Ganago in the wings, you wonder if that might eat into his playing time. If he struggles a little bit, it'll be very interesting to see, because it seems like there's a million different ways the Revs could go with this. But in terms of a prediction, in terms of like a realistic prediction, I mentioned, I think around the playoff line is really where I expect them to be at the end of the season. You mentioned there's a lot of attacking talent. It's just how it all comes together. There's really a wide range of outcomes here where the Revs, everything kind of falls into place. Heel meshes perfectly with his new 2 wingers. The center backs that they bring in adjust the league extremely well. And then there's also another timeline here where Carlos Gil declines. I mean, he's in his mid-30s. Thomas Shankly does not return to form and is a bit of a disappointment. We saw that with Dylan Barrero last year. He was the U22 player the Revs got, tore his ACL, came back, only scored 1 goal last year, actually against Miami. It was a very weak goal. It was a toe poke that I believe went through Calendar's legs. That was his only goal last season.
That keeps being replayed down here in Miami because there's a lot of Drake hate down here, but yes.
Oh, I'm sure that's Drake hate exhibit number 1. I'm sure, but his option was declined. The Revs didn't want to pay him his salary, and he was a massive disappointment. So if Shankly comes back and he's a disappointment, if he'll furthers his decline, if Campana does not pull through, or if he wants to leave a little bit sooner, and if the back line doesn't come together at all, the depth options the Revs have for center back right now is Tanner Beeson, who I haven't heard a single nice thing that any San Jose fan has said about Tanner Beeson. If you talk to San Jose fans, they think Tanner Beeson is the worst player in the world, so I'm not very excited about that. And then we also have Wyatt Omsberg from Chicago. And those are fine deep bench options, but there's a really good chance that we need someone to step into the starting lineup. So I think the defense could be a real big mess. So overall, everything could fall into place and they could rise up the standings, but there's more questions and more red flags than sure things on this team right now. So I think this will be a team that battles for the playoffs, but if they miss it, I don't think anyone in New England will be surprised.
Caleb Porter's in the hot seat.
If you ask fans, he's on the hot seat. The team and the moves they've made sure make it seem like this is a long-term play. And I don't really know how much heat there is within the organization, but outside of the organization, Caleb Porter's approval rating is very, very low. I think that if the Revs have mixed results at the beginning of the year or bad results at the beginning of the year, but they are showing progress, I think Caleb Porter gets a little bit more rope. But if this team is not making any progress, I could absolutely see a coaching change before the next transfer window opens. Because as I mentioned, they have a DP spot and a U22 spot opening up. They won't want Caleb Porter filling those spots if he's not able to make do with what he's had, because they've made the entire roster essentially has been changed. And Caleb Porter is really, planting his stake here. So if he's not able to make any progress here in the first half of the season, I don't expect him to finish out the season.
All right. Mr. Johnstone, we appreciate you taking the time. And please let everybody know if they want a deeper dive into the New England Revolution, not just these quick 15 minutes that they got. Let them know where they can find you.
Yeah, you can follow us on all podcast platforms at Revolution Recap. We do weekly game recaps and then also a bit of a midweek preview. We're also on every social media platform, Facebook, Threads, Blue Sky, Twitter, X, Instagram, but mostly we are active on X and Instagram. So make sure you go and follow us there.
Well, again, Johnstone, appreciate you joining the show, and we'll be catching up throughout the season.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. All right, so we move on from New England, and we move up even further north to Toronto with my man Noel from TFC Tunnel Club. What's going on, Noel?
Hey, what's going on, man? How's things?
Hey, living the dream. I love the Forest kit.
Yeah, you know what? It's the FA Cup today, right? And they had a bit of a scary time today, so just repping the Reds. It's my hometown originally, so you know.
Absolutely love that. Love that. I see the Bradley back there also. All right. So 2024 recap. You guys started well, right? Winning tight games, and then kind of the wheels kind of fell off a bit. What's the 2024 recap? I mean, you had a coach change in the middle of the season. They quit before they can get fired. Like 2024, just break it down.
You know what? It was a surprise, right? We started, as you said, we started really well. We were really kind of like, okay, this is vibes. We're not rock bottom, right? That's first win. And I think for most of 2024, we're in the top 6, right? And that was kind of like, is it a real place? Are we kind of there? And then we kind of started having the TFC specials, the discipline issues. We got a lot of really dumb red cards. Bernadeschi got himself sent off like 3 times pretty quickly, right? So
I know he got sent off against Miami for sure.
Yeah, and it was just, the self implosion, right? And then it just kind of right at the end, right when it was key, it was, you know what I mean? Like it just kind of fell off, and we just dropped out of the playoffs, and and then John Herdman departs at the end of the year, and due to the drone gate and everything else, and so now we're back at square one where we were this time last year, right? So it hasn't changed much.
It feels like so long ago. Sebastian Javinko was the envy of all the MLS clubs, and here we are.
He's back at the club. That's one good thing.
Know. Well, not on the pitch though. That's where we want him.
Oh, he's too old now, right?
All right. So this offseason, what was the biggest departure? The player that you'll probably miss the most?
We didn't let too many leave, right? There wasn't too much. I think really from a playing standpoint, Prince Owusu was our leading scorer last year with 9 goals. Not saying very much because it also tells you one of our problems is scoring goals. But at the end of the day, he's gone to our bitter rivals in Montreal, so he's going to probably score against us next year. So that one might come back to haunt us a little bit, as it normally does. But generally, the biggest probably departure from the club was obviously John Herdman and that whole having to shift to a new manager. Obviously Robin Fraser's coming. I think that might be probably a good like for like in terms of just trading out. But yeah, not too many left, unfortunately.
And as far as biggest arrivals, any big arrivals come onto the team?
We've only signed one player so far on loan, right? Which is Theo Corbeneau from Wolverhampton Wanderers, and then he went to Granada in Spain. So we have him on loan, but that's really the only arrival we've got. We're rumored to be getting a couple of players this week, but I am still waiting.
I mean, long are the days of Pozuelo on the team. Have you guys found that number 10?
No, it's one. You know what? It's the position that we need a 9. We don't have a 9, but we need a 10
what about
too.
DeAndre
Right?
Kerr?
Yeah, I still think he's best. Still best on the wing, man. Like he's he's got those moments where you think there's a real good player there, but I still think he's owing. I think at the end of the day, you do need a 10, right? I'm a little bit gutted. Lucho Costa went to Dallas today, so that would have been a really nice pickup. But you can dream.
Well, Toronto has the money to spend. Well, not right now, maybe, but they're usually not shy about opening the pocketbook. I guess before we get into that, I mean, I have to ask this Italian connection. They love each other. They hate each other. What is it? Because I always hear one or the other. Are they both still going to be here? Because I thought they would be long gone by now. Bernaduce
No,
and Insigne,
you
I mean.
can't really move them is the problem, right? So we've heard all off season. Today everyone on TFC Live has been. It's the last day of the Turkish transfer window today, right? So everyone's been like, announce Besiktas, announce Insigne to Besiktas. It's like we've all been watching, Turkish feeds all day just to try and see if we can get anything from that side. But I think Berner's going to stay long term a little bit. They obviously extended his contract a little bit to another year to 2028. But the Insigne thing is, I think he's more likely gone in the summer at this point.
Okay, so they're both going to stick it through. Now, if you could pick one to stay, would it be Bernadette?
Berner, absolutely.
Yeah.
Insigne his production is just not there. Like if you look at him in a comparison to Messi last year in terms of minutes played, games played, they're very similar in terms of the amount of time they played. But I think Messi has something like 38 goal and contributions. Thank you. Whereas Insigne's got like 3. It's it's just I'm being sarcastic, but I think it was 7. I know. Right? He got, I think 3 goals, 4 assists. For a guy making 15 million a year, it's outrageous, right? So
Robin Fraser, new formations and tactics, I would assume. How are you guys playing? Looking to play out the back, possession ball? What you're expecting to see on the pitch, or what other teams should expect to see on the pitch from Toronto this year?
We kind of got a hint of it from, we a lot of supporters last week got to have a meet and greet with Robin Fraser and obviously the brass at TFC, and the idea is, I think today against Colorado in the friendly they played something similar to a 4-5-1. I think they also played around with a 4-2-3-1. So obviously goals are going to, as they stated this week, are going to come by committee. I think they're going to sit deeper a little bit, and then I think try and hit on the counter and try and break teams down that way. At the end of the day, if you look at the Eastern Conference right now, they are like loading up. It's like an arms race, right? You guys are stacked. Atlanta's reloading. This team's just is kind of going out there. And I think TFC is going to have to be a lot more defensive than they have been in previous. I think he'll play a double pivot and then just try and hit on the counter and try and play a little bit like Nottingham Forest, to be honest, where you've got a little bit of absorb the pressure and then hit and just convert on your chances. But it'll be interesting to see how he plays, because he played obviously a little bit different when Robin Fraser was in Colorado, right? So, and again, he did a good job there with not a lot of budget. And I think the way that Colorado plays, I think is kind of more what he's going to do with TFC. I just don't know if he has all the pieces like he did in Colorado.
Now, as far as strengths and weaknesses, I'm assuming Sean Johnson would be one of the strengths. What would be the strength on this team?
I think it's just work rate and effort in the midfield. I think Matty Longstaff was a good pickup last year. Obviously he came off a big injury, got released by Newcastle. We picked him up. As the season got on, he got better. I think there's a lot of, in terms of the midfield quality, I think there's a little bit lacking in terms of that 10 spot. But I think in terms of the 6 and the 8, we've obviously got Jonathan Osorio. We obviously have Coelho and Longstaff. So I think that's a plus. Defensively, I still think we're missing a good centre-back pairing. Sean Johnson's obviously fantastic between the sticks. And then the biggest weakness is absolutely up front. We just can't score to save our lives at the moment. So, which is what? But you put a lot of that on DeAndre Kerr? Well, he's the only recognized striker we have listed on our books right now, which terrifies me. Yeah, I can see that. All right. Now, going into this season, what is the expectation from the fans? What is the fan expectation coming into this season? Have you been on our Twitter feed lately? It's not cheery. I'll be honest. Like, I'm realistic because it's just the way I am. I don't see us in the playoffs without a really good addition up front, because I always look at it. I always take the goal difference, right? And I always look at that kind of stat. We conceded more goals than the disastrous 2023 year last year. It was only 2 more, but it was still worse than that. But we ended up with a minus 21 goal difference last year because we just couldn't score and we just couldn't finish the chances that we had of those games. So I do think we're going to struggle. We might squeak into the playoffs. Depends. Hopefully everybody else around us has a bit of a wobble too, but that's not really the most hopeful of expectations.
Okay, so yeah, so your expectations are very, very low. And then I guess it's just time to ask for your actual predictions of the season. So you think that you'll end up somewhere along that playoff line, 8, 9, 10?
I got a feeling it'll be 10. It depends what they add, right? Because I think if you look at TFC as a whole, if everybody plays and everybody plays to what the level that they should do, we should be a playoff team at the very bottom end of the playoff team. But I just worry about injuries, depth, because that's ultimately what our problem has been last year and this year. Is just we've got essentially $23 million tied up in two players, and one of them doesn't play that much, and the rest of the team is fairly bare in terms of talent up front. So it's going to be if you can stop the goals going in and just play defensively and be a lot more sound, then we can maybe have a shot at the bottom half of the playoffs. But without reinforcements, I'm struggling to find where they'll actually do better.
My guy Richard Greenberg, Toronto FC fan, here is saying bottom 4. So I'm seeing what you say where on Twitter. It probably doesn't sound like anybody's very optimistic, because bottom 4 is rough. Especially, I mean, I think that you guys have the roster to at least, like you said, fight for a playoff spot.
It just depends, honestly, what they add, right? And that's this week they're on about adding a new center back, a new midfielder, and a TAM level striker that will hopefully turn into a DP level striker, is what we're understanding to be having come in. That will make huge additions, but I don't know if it's enough. Maybe they can come back again in the summer and reload a bit more in the summer once some other players get moved on. But I think if you look across MLS and if you look across all the pundits and all the experts that kind of do this for a living, everyone's got us in the bottom 4. So it's just not enough to rebuild.
So, okay.
Yeah,
and
I think
then
there's quite a few.
You guys are in the Canadian Championship, obviously. And you guys were not part of, you're just in the Canadian Championship?
Yeah, so we didn't do Leagues Cup, so it's just a Canadian Championship, which really that's a big thing for us, right? Vancouver's won it 3 years running. We pretty much gave it to them last year because we couldn't quite finish off chances last year, and then they got it to penalties and won on penalties. So we have Montreal in the first round, so that one's always going to be a bit of a good entertaining game. So if you can beat the two big MLS teams in that competition, it's a pretty good chance you're going to win it.
And then I had a question here. Is there no chance that Etienne gets a lot of playing time?
He's injured right now. So apparently he has a groin strain and something. So he's out. I do like him. He played a lot of different positions for us last year though, right? So he ended up, he played up front, he played out right, he played out left, he played center. He played everywhere last year, but I think he's one of those guys is like a Swiss Army knife for your team, right? You can play him anywhere, pretty much across the front.
Spicer too, no?
I like Spicer. He started the season like a man on fire. It's the first time I've seen a draft pick that Toronto actually play really well. The rest of them normally end up somewhere else. The only other draft pick that Toronto's made that's done really well is kicking for the Dallas Cowboys. So it's a case of Spicer looks like he's the real deal. He got pretty much injured towards the end of the season, never really got back in his stride. I'm actually hoping he might get a shot up front this year and see if he can do some damage in that number 9 spot.
And then I guess we could finish it off right here. Matsuya, Matt, I'm just going to call you Matt. Matt, I always have a hard time pronouncing your name. What's the fan culture like in Toronto? Do you have a big fan base? Is there an exciting atmosphere at your stadium?
When BMO is bouncing, if you go back to 2017 and you go watch those Giovinco goals, the Josie Altidore MLS Cup final goals, there's no place louder. TFC has been known for it for a long time that, we're loud, we're obnoxious, we travel well. Obviously there's a fair few of us going to be in Nashville again this year. Chicago is always a good trip for us. So we travel well, we're passionate, we're just, at the end of the day, we got 26,000 attendance last year and we were not winning. The year we were rock bottom 2023, we still had the 3rd highest attendance in the league and we're not winning. So it kind of tells you we're used to winning and used to the fans being there, but we come no matter what, right? It's a great place to come and watch a game, honestly.
Look, and you guys have a star on that badge, which is more than most can say.
Yeah, and it's something that weighs heavy, right? Because we want another, right? We're and
sure.
you know, as the guys behind me, Mr. Bradley, Mr. Altidore set the tone, right? And Giovinco is as well. So it's nice to see a lot of those guys kind of coming back into the club in a coaching role. We just re-signed Stephen Beitashour as a coach. Obviously, Giovinco is now doing our scouting for a striker for us. So yeah, you're kind of hoping some of that 2017 magic rubs off on this team and they get some fight and belief back in them. So we have a decent year because I hate losing. I'm a terrible loser. I'm an even worse winner. I will be. You just have to follow my
unbearable.
Yeah, very much so.
Well, I appreciate you jumping on with us. If you want an in-depth look at Toronto, make sure that you go follow Noel and TFC Tunnel Club. Well, actually, I'll let you plug it because this is just a quick 15-minute preview. I want them to jump on with you so I can really get the feel for Toronto.
Yeah, we do the Tunnel Club, which is just our fan reaction show. So anytime there's any breaking news or after games, we always do go live, me and my co-host Sean. And then the other part of our group is the Toronto Till I Die podcast, which is Mike, and JP Nesca. So those guys do the weekly show, very similar to what you guys do. So yeah, we're just a big group. We're just passionate about our club, and yeah, just follow us at Toronto Till I Die and the TFC Tunnel Club. And then I'm NC Allen 80 on Twitter. You can find me if you search TFC Live. I'm pretty vocal.
All right, no, I appreciate you taking the time to jump on, and make sure that you go follow Noel and TFC Tunnel Club for all the extra Toronto stuff. Thank you again, Noel.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Appreciate for having me.
All right, have a good one. All right, so we go from up north. We come back a little further south to DC United with my guy John Hoffman. What's going on, John? How are you doing, sir?
I'm, hanging in there. How about yourself?
Yeah, living the dream. So we're talking 2025 DC United. But before we do, 2024, you guys missed the playoffs because of a tiebreaker. The team that got in ended up winning the play-in, ended up beating the number 1 seed, and ended up having a pretty decent season just based off of that. Give me a recap of the 2024 season and how it could have been you guys that was looking at as eliminating Inter Miami in that first round.
Boy, I don't even know if things had gone right. That had been the situation. I think probably for society, it was probably good that we missed out. What can you say? What can you say about 2024 DC United? New coach, new GM, same problems, new problems, but same problems. I think this club, we've been doing the show since 2016 now, with nothing really to show for it from a trophies perspective or a playoff run perspective. But last year, I think it was a story of Christian Benteke and nobody else. It was a story about a team that lacked so much depth that frequently had 3 players on the bench during games, no subs, 3 goalkeepers sometimes to make up the bench. There were injuries. There were empty roster spots. The big story, if you were to look overall what's going on with this club, why is it like this right now? You could put the blame mostly at the feet of Dave Casper. For years and years of roster mismanagement, of basically stripping the copper wire out of your own house to sell it so that you can afford the electricity for next month, and then next month being like, well, I guess the lights are going to have to come off. That's sort of what happened in 2024, and the check finally came due. So last year and this year, Ali Mackay, the new GM, said, no more. We're going to fix this. We're not going to spend beyond our means. We're not going to take out loans against the future. We're going to build a team that works for now, works for next year, and then we'll go from there. So despite almost making the playoffs, I think for a certain point of the year, the team had the highest XG in MLS. The team has the highest, and I think for the entire season had whatever the silly analytical stat that tells you how much you press. We're the best at that, and had a Golden Boot winner. So there was a very few good things, but then there was all the things I said about that were bad. So that's.
But it was so top heavy because you guys scored 40 goals, I think, altogether, and Benteke had more than half of those. So it's very top heavy. Now, before we talk about the arrivals to hopefully help Benteke, any departures that you're feeling, that you're like, you know what, we're gonna feel that as a team because that we lost that player.
Well, you picked a good time to do this. I would say before. So the big departure before a couple of days ago was Matthias Klick going to Atlanta. DP. The fun part about that is we get to keep the DP slot, but not the DP player, or we get to hold it but not use it. So DC United is unable to use that designated player spot because it's used on Klick despite him not being on our team. Did we get a lot of salary cap relief? You're asking. You're figuring. Surely you did. If you kept the DP slot and didn't get to use it and lost the player, you probably got a lot of money back. Well, no. We didn't. We got $300,000 of cap relief. No player, no slot. So that was not. I hope that people watching are having the same question as I do. Then why get rid of him? Yeah, no. I mean, that's a great question. That's a really good question that you could ask. There's lots of theories among fans about, was he a fit for the team? Was his style of play that good? Was he going to be happy with a role maybe that's reduced as the club tries to pivot towards younger players? I believe at the time he was sold, the story being told was we need to make minutes for Jackson Hopkins and for other players. Jackson Hopkins is injured and will be injured until June, I believe, with an ankle injury. So that was good. Really like that trade. I think the people that are happy with that are people that just didn't like that player.
Got it.
I think last year he had 11 assists. So it's certainly something to lose. The big departure that will really hurt, I think, hurts me. I don't know about everybody else, but Ted Kudapietro sold with the new MLS acquisition rule where you can trade real money for interleague transfers.
Yeah.
I believe it's like 1.2 million with an add-on fee and a sell-on fee and blah 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 blah. Is that a good amount of money for a player who had 2 goals last year and was injured much of the year and is injured right now? Probably. You could probably say it is. I think it's probably decent money.
1.2 mil, I would say so also.
The challenge is if you're building a team around young players, if your identity is going to be we're going to give minutes to young players that can run, that can press, that are creative, that are cost controlled. We just signed Kudapietro to a 2-year extension on the under-22 contract last year. But he's gone. He's out the door too. There's a question of, is he going to be replaced this window? Looking like he will not be.
No.
So depth will be tested immediately right away. I think that's from the departure side. Those are the 2 players that really matter. Everyone else, no one's being missed. Christian Dahome is the only player I believe that left that has found a new team at a level equal or greater to MLS. He's now playing down in Mexico. But other than that, a lot of just deadwood.
And I'm scared to ask about arrivals. So, because you sound down.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're a DC United fan and you're not, you're willfully not. And we have to, and if you ever listen to the show, we are kind of criticized as being too positive, if you can believe that.
Oh no, I can't.
But it is. I'll listen. Hey, it's 9:00 on a Tuesday. We had our show yesterday, so you're getting the real cynical John versus
got you
the show presentation on Monday nights. Lots of players came in. I would say there was lots of moves that happened in the middle and end of last year that didn't materialize due to them just getting there too late or injuries. So there's lots of new players coming in. If you look at what is the potential first choice 11 going into 2025. The goalkeeper out of South Korea, who has told us to call him June, and I'm not going to. Yep. So he's our new goalkeeper. He is under an under 22 initiative player, I believe. There's a transfer fee. He's being paid well. He is. We actually line changed our entire goalkeeping core. So there were 4 keepers. We got rid of all of them. We've signed 3 new ones. So that's unusual, atypical in any league. That's what we did. It is assumed that he will start. The 2 backup goalkeepers, or we're assuming backup goalkeepers, Luis Barraza and the guy from Tampa Bay, whose name I can't remember at the moment. I'm not. Yeah. So he was the USL. He played in USL Championship. Jordan Farr. No, Jordan Farr he's the guy who will probably be the third string goalkeeper probably again here as well, and that's fine. Players who could make a difference. Hideo Kojima is a player that people are very Jose Kojima, sorry, PlayStation fans. He is a player from St. Louis, box-to-box player. He also plays in the wing. St. Louis. The rare occasion where a team was sad to see our addition go, he was a player that there was I think $400,000 of GAM to acquire him. I talked about the midfield sort of being not depleted, but like some of the talent leaving. He's a player that's being looked at to fill that gap. João Peglo, a player he's a Brazilian player who is playing in Poland. The stats are not great. If you look at the stats, not impressive. I think he had a goal in 17 appearances last year. He is now being expected to be a chance creator and goal scorer. So hopefully that works out. Gabriel Pirani.
I'm sorry to cut you off. You guys picked up Lucas McNaughton, right?
Yeah. Yep. He's, I think, probably rumored to be our third or fourth center back in the rotation. So not really. Kai Rowles is the player that we signed from Scotland, Australia national team. Nailed on starter. We'll see how that works out. He's, the good part for him is he's in the middle of his season. So he's had 2 preseasons in the course of like 8 months. So he had his first press avail. It was like, that's a lot of running. That's a lot of conditioning work to do. And also I'm in Florida and it's hot and I was just in the winter. So we're struggling there. But Kai Rowles and João Peglo are the players who probably people look at as saying they're your starters. We're going to have to see what they do. There are, again, like I was saying last year, players like Boris Enow came in, didn't really make an impact. David Schnegg came in, didn't make an impact. But those are players we expect to have a major impact in 2025 because they're going to have to. The other Randall Leal is the other player that is somewhat interesting. Injured most of the year for Nashville. He was in the difference between how Nashville handled their designated player and how we did. They just cut him, and then they're able to buy out his contract and the DP slot and reuse it.
Keep that DP spot.
So I think that was smart of them. The demand may be higher for Leal, but they could have just cut him, and it would have been anyway. We'll move on. But Randall Leal is another player that's, if he stays healthy, there's a potential that he is able to add some sort of variability to the attack, and so that it's not just Benteke scoring 90% of the goals. He probably still will, though. That's likely what's going to happen.
Well, I mean, I think that's where you need to beef up is the attack. So Randall Leal. As far as the formation goes, now you guys don't really play that possession ball.
No, and we definitely don't have the roster for it. So I'm glad that's right. It's really about it's a hair on fire sort of transition offense.
Right.
Win the ball in the attacking third and make things happen. So that's what this roster is being geared to. It's also a style of play that I think is very conducive to injury and exhaustion, particularly playing in the DC summer. At least now we have a fuller roster, so we'll have some potential possibilities for when the season moves on. Someone did bring in a good point, though. During international breaks, when Matty Peltola and Boris Enow are both of the national teams, the center midfield seemed really, really thin. When Click was here, that was one more body, but it's basically now Jackson Hopkins and a fill-in. And both of those players are going to get called up every time there's an international break. So
I think the MLS did a pretty decent job of avoiding playing through international breaks this year.
That'll be great. First time in my entire time being a fan. That'll be good.
They did a pretty decent job. I think we might play through one, if I'm correct. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's only playing through one. Are there any players that you would say, look out for this guy? For anybody that hasn't watched DC, like, you know what, look out for this guy this year. Obviously, Benteke is an obvious one, but look out for this guy.
Aaron Herrera, if somehow he's sort of escaped your sort of perception as a MLS fan over the last 6 or 7 years, he is, to my mind, the
fullback.
Sorry,
fullback.
Yeah, fullback. Right back for DC United. He is probably the most essential player on the team, other than Benteke. When he is out, either through suspension or national team call up or injury, the team falls off the cliff. And not just because the depth was bad last year, and it was because Christian Dahomey was playing right back. It was so bad at certain points. but he is a player that can create chances. He's also a very good defender. He has speed. He has power. Tries to shoot it occasionally. That's not really where his bailiwick is. But he's a player that I think, if somehow that's not really been where you've been looking at on the field for DC United, that's where I would focus in. Pirani is the player that you should watch, because if he's doing well, then Alan Kai is doing a dance. He's saying, I'm right, you guys are all wrong. If he's doing well, this team is doing okay. If he is performing the way he has his entire career thus far, we're not going to miss the playoffs by 1 point. If he's your 10 playing every match and plays like he has been over his whole career, we're in trouble, and the summer window is going to be a busy one, I think.
Okay, so Pirani. All right, and then if you were to say a strength of this team or a weakness of this team.
Yeah, I would say probably from a strength perspective, it's winning the ball in the air.
Okay.
Benteke is the best player at winning the ball in the air in the world, not just MLS, but in every single league. He's the best player at it. He's not going to become shorter as he gets older. He's going to continue to be able to do that. There are lots of fans that are sort of upset or saying, why do we always play the same way? We always go to Benteke. Yeah, because you have usually a team that hasn't made the playoffs in 6 years does not have a player who is the best in the world at anything. So if you have a player that's the best in the world at something, you should structure your offense around that.
Absolutely.
Around that, particularly when he also puts the ball in the net the way he does. So he is the strength, is without a doubt the strength. The weakness is the other attacking part of the field. You called your point out to it before. Pirani, there is a large amount of hope being placed on this player who Gabriel Pirani, if you are unfamiliar with him, he's an under 22 initiative player, signed out of Brazil. He had a run in the end of last season, around 5 or 6 games, where he was a super sub and would come on and score. He scored 6 goals or 5 goals last year due to just this crazy run that he had at the end of the season. He has never been able to put 90 minutes together in a good way for this club. Hasn't happened yet. In this offseason, he now has another player on the team that speaks Portuguese. He's been married. He's got another year under his belt. He's a little bit older. This team needs him to do well. They don't have.
How old is he?
He's 22, I believe.
22. Okay.
21, 22. There's no other number 10 on the roster, really. Leal is the player who will probably get shoehorned into that. There's no natural 10. And if you ask Matt Doyle and other analysts around the league, he's not a 10.
Right.
But that's what we've got. That's the
you got to work with.
That we're in.
And your weakness.
Oh boy. I think probably what would our weakness be? I think it's a lack of secondary scoring, lack of options to if Benteke goes down.
Top heavy.
We can just not play. If Christian's hurt, we can just give them 3 goals and say, we're gonna go home, guys. It's not gonna happen for us. Dominic Badji, the drop off from Benteke to Badji is pretty dramatic. So that's one thing. That's a weakness. I would say we're a little unproven all over the place. We have raised the level of the depth on the team. So they've basically taken, instead of signing big players, they've taken all the money and they've spread it around the field. And everyone, the bottom of the ship goes up a little bit. But there's no game changers within this roster, really, or players that and have done it before. So that's the question: is how much does depth get you in MLS?
Right.
It's about the future. Everything about this year is about next year. They're taking all of their money that they're getting from player sales and GAM, and they're paying down transfer fees from previous years and this year. So that way, in 2026. We're looking at the world is our oyster at that point. We'll have potentially 3 DP slots to spend. So if you could just get through this year, maybe it'll be good next year. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, I guess that leads me into 2025 fan expectations. What is the fan expectation this year?
They're miserable for the most part. I would say based on the comments the questions and comments we get every week. If you go to Reddit, if you go to Blue Sky, wherever you go, I think fans are saying, who do I care about on this team? Who should I care about? Who do I get attached? What jersey do I buy? Who's going to be here in 2 years? The vice captain's been here for 6 months. What do you want me to do here? You're selling players and not bringing any players that I've ever heard of before. That's always kind of a recipe for fan discontent. Expectations. People are talking about wooden spoon. Anything's possible. I think about right around where we were. I think fighting in and amongst the last spot in the playoffs, which should not be good enough considering how long this team has not made the playoffs. But I will note one thing that I just saw before we recorded. I got an email saying if you buy season tickets to DC United and they don't make the playoffs, you get 30% of your money back. So there are a couple of things you could take from that. The less cynical one is saying, boy, they really believe in themselves this year. That's the less cynical. The cynical take is they can't give these tickets away and they're going to discount you in order to get you in the door.
They're going to give you as many incentives as they can. Yeah. So what do you do on decision day? Do you root for the 30% or do you root for the first
I thought about that.
Exit?
I thought about that. There's going to be it's like when you're at a basketball game and you're rooting for chicken nuggets for them to miss the second free throw for your season tickets.
And then the realistic prediction.
Yeah, I mean, not what is ninth the last spot in the playoffs?
Kind of, yeah. You mean they end that playing game?
10th is my prediction.
Last year. So I repeated last year. Any rumors about Benteke trying to get out of there?
Strangely, no. He just signed an extension. I think at this stage in his career, he's been there, done that. I think he wants to feel comfortable and needed. So I think he's happy for now. We have talked about if things go really badly in the first third of the season, and he and Troy Lesane are no longer seeing eye to eye, who gets fired first, or like who gets moved on? Like who does the team move on from? I don't know. You could flip a coin. I would say Troy. I would say if you lose your one good player,
I would hope so.
Yeah, you would hope, but then also you could say like, well, maybe they can get some Gam or something if they trade him to Charlotte or something, and then you could have an all Crystal Palace striker pairing up there. It's lots of things you could do, I guess.
Now, let me tell you something. If Charlotte would have managed, and obviously this isn't a rumor or anything, we're just putting it out there. That would be, with that defense, that would be absolutely deadly. John, before I let you go and you plug your stuff, RFK Refugees, RFK, the stadium is what I'm assuming.
Yeah, no, the other guys really screwed up our Google results for the last couple years. But yes, RFK Stadium. That's why the team. Okay. That's why we're called that. But we do a live show every Monday night at 8:30 on every platform. So look for us on it. We're not on X anymore, but if we're on Blue Sky, we're on Facebook, we're on, I don't know, Flickr, we're on
YouTube,
Tumblr. Yeah, YouTube. We're definitely on YouTube. So wherever you look for stuff, we're on there, and we've been through a bunch of bad years. We're going to go through a bunch of bad more. So if you're a DC United fan and you're looking for a little bit of relief, check us out.
You're a battered MLS fan, just like everybody else.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
There you go. You're a battered MLS fan. And make sure that you check them out. They're talking DC United. We gave a quick 15-20 minute preview. If you want to get more in depth with DC United, make sure you check out the RFK Refugees. And if you want to check batterfans.com, we got the DC United Believe shirt and all that other good stuff cooking over there. So make sure that you check out batterfans.com. John, appreciate you taking the time to join us. As always, you are awesome. And we'll be talking hopefully throughout the season.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one, John.
Take care.
All right. Now, we were in Canada. We went back down to DC, but let's move back up to Canada. We got, let's see right here, Andy joining us to talk a little CF Montreal. What's going on, Andy?
Que voila. What's going on?
Oh, there you go. Que voila. Look at. Are you in Miami?
I'm from Miami, yeah, originally.
Oh, okay.
I'm from Miami.
How did you end up in Montreal?
Man, let's not get into that,
Okay, all right.
For CF Montreal, no. Thank you for having me. We'll get started. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm not gonna lie to you, Andy. I was not expecting you to hit me with the que voila. You kind of threw me off a little bit. So.
We're just getting started, man. We're just getting started.
There we go. All right, so
real fun, baby, all day.
So you guys started off the year pretty slow, and then you ended strong. You won. Was it like 5 out of the last 6? Or I know you guys made one hell of a run to end the season. Joseph Martinez finally heated up at the end of the season. Give me just a recap of the 2024 season.
You know what, Daniel? I was thinking of that a long time. I was like, how can I recap this? How can I recap this? Like, how can I make this right? And yeah, like you said it, we started the season slow, 6 games away from our home stadium, games, 6 away games, and this season we're doing 7 away games, and in the middle of all that,
Yeah.
we let go mutual consent our technical director as well as the assistant technical director, and the homegrown player requested a trade, which was fantastic. It just sent everything in shambles. So and I'm seeing these comments. So yeah, it was yes, I am eating very frozen croquetas. And so yeah, it was the most exciting thing is that whether you guys know it or not, the within all that mess in 2024, the most exciting thing was that Lionel Messi for the first time came to Montreal to play. So that was the one dose of happiness that we had. But yes, we ended the season strong. It just seemed to click. But as a very Montreal thing to happen, it obviously at the end in the off season, Joseph Martinez left and decided to go to
It's
San
too cold
Jose.
for him.
So yeah, I mean that's how you can sum it up. But yeah, it was a very strong finish. Caden Clark really showed up towards the end of the season and gave us a lot of hope for this upcoming season. But we're just getting with new pieces. Everybody's saying, but what if Joseph Martinez would have stayed or anything where he was the missing piece? But I don't know. We'll
And
see.
we're gonna get into the rivals because I think that you guys low risk, high reward with one of the signings. But when it comes to the biggest departures, Wanyama, isn't he a club legend? He's finally left the club. Oh no, not a club legend.
Hard to say, man, because some people really appreciated him in 2022. What he did, he came in humble, but then towards the end, it got ugly. I mean, that part in the Montreal fan base, it's very split. A lot of people really liked
Okay.
what he did. They want to remember where he came from, and but then there was so much. The last 2 years were not pretty, to say the least, and there was a lot of trouble back and forth. But he did really well 2 years ago. So in 2022 with Wilfred Nancy and all that, when CF Montreal had one of their better seasons, that's the best version we got of him. But after that, it all went downhill. So yeah, more than anything, if you ask CF Montreal fans, it's not really per se the person that they miss, but they're happy that they don't have to pay that DP salary for someone that's spending their time in the bench. So. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because he was last year. He spent most of the time on the bench. No,
pretty much all of them. I don't have the stats
Yeah.
in front of me, but yeah, it was pretty much all of them. He won only,
So
I think, for the
who-
Canadian Championship.
So who is the biggest departure for Montreal this offseason?
I mean, I
Is
just
it
mentioned
Joseph?
it, right? Joseph, yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
100%. I mean, how do you replace someone like that can just change a game on his own? I mean, you guys probably saw it in Miami, right? He can.
No, but a lot of people in Miami were upset with his production. So I'm wondering. So you guys were really happy with him because I thought that he started pretty slow and then heated up towards the end.
It was special because he seemed to really connect really well with Caden Clark and another Miami guy, Bryce Duke.
Bryce Duke.
They seemed to connect really, really well up front. And it just, again, it wasn't necessarily that Joseph Martinez would score the goals, but he would do some insane way. Like he would position himself in some ways that would allow Caden Clark and Bryce Duke to get more chances. And that's what really made the difference. Yes, we do too, Mr. Dennis. but it was but it's just that. It's just the different facet of him being used as a dummy to give the ball the other opportunities that he really missed. So that kind of experience, that kind of vision, that kind of it's definitely going to be something that's going to be, we're going to have to wait and see.
I think that was an underrated part of his game is all the defenders he took with him because he used to make very purposeful runs to open up space for other players. But a lot of people just didn't give him credit. At least when he was in Miami. Biggest arrival, is it Vrioni?
Yes, Giacomo Vrioni. But I mean, everybody's really excited. Again, the comes with a DP title from New England, and he so we're very excited to see what he can do. It's kind of scary though because everybody's as you know everybody in Miami, anywhere that they play, the team is excited for the new signing. But throughout all of training camp, he's been just kind of on the side, they say recovering, trying to catch up with the team, but there's no official injury, and people are just like, okay, well, we only have 2 weeks left, so what's going on? When are we gonna start seeing a little bit more of him in the scrimmages or whatnot? So it's a wait and see approach. Hopefully he can. I don't know if it's too late for him to be considered a starter and come.
What about Jalen Neal? Because I was shocked when you guys landed Jalen Neal.
I think we're all shocked. I mean, it's an impressive. It's already a very young back line that we have, but again, similar situation to Giacomo Vioni. He's recovering right now. He hasn't been practicing with the team. He has an injury that he got injured with the national team. He got an ankle injury, so he does have a reason. But people are very excited because he's a young kid with a lot of prospect, and it's he's kind of the profile that Montreal looks for in players around the MLS. Players that have maybe been put to the side by their team because of different reasons. Like LA Galaxy is a win now team, right? Just like Inter Miami is a win now team, right? So CF Montreal is very much about like, we'll take our time, and if we make it to playoffs, cool, we'll see there, right? So, but we're very much about developing and giving minutes to younger players.
And then you picked up another 9.
Yes, Mr. Prince Owusu.
Prince Owusu, yes.
Yes, yes. Well, again, very excited for him.
Big body, big guy.
We kind of want to. He hasn't been very impressive in training camp.
Okay.
I went to training camp last week and saw him a few times, and you want to say it's just practice. Maybe he's getting his feet under him or whatnot, but you still want to see him score goals even in practice, right?
Sure.
So we'll see. But people, again, situational players that have been put to the side by their team, and Montreal just jumped up on the opportunity to give them minutes. So we'll see. Hopefully he can score a lot of goals.
Now, as far as formation and tactics goes, do you guys play what formation you probably going to come out in as far as tactics? Do you guys play in the possession, the counter? How do you guys look? How do you think you're going to look this year on the pitch?
It looks like it's going to stay the same way it's been. We've done since 2021, since Olivier Renard was the technical director. It's a 3-4-2-1 or a 3-4-1-2 back three with the 2 wing backs. That's the way we seem to be signing players as well. The kind of profiles we look for, and those and it's every player can play 2 or 3 positions, right? So it's going to be a very shifty formation. When we watch practice, Daniel, like I told you last week, I was at the practice, and you try to like nail it down to what formation they're doing, what backline they're having, and they just seem to shift so quickly, and then one moment. So we'll see. We'll see that last year, our biggest weakness was our set pieces, which the president and the coach did say over and over again in their press conferences, and that has nothing to do with any formation or any striker, right? It's set pieces defending it. So yeah, love the shirt, by the way, Daniel. Where did I get that? I love it.
Well, this is the Miami version. I guess since you brought it up, because you are you're very astute at this. There's the Montreal version on batteredfans.com. We got all the stores. There you go. So batteredfans.com. We got all the MLS themed Believe shirts.
Hey, I love that.
I love. Yeah.
I'll send you my address.
All right. Players to watch. Is it Bryce Duke? That people that might not be from Miami and Montreal that might not be expecting a good Bryce Duke season, because we thought big things of Bryce Duke down here, and then he got moved, and I don't know how he's been looking up there. What player would you say this is the player that you should watch for this coming season?
You know what? The player that seems to be on everybody's radar right now is Nathan Saliba. He's the midfielder. He's a third year now.
Got a great last name if you watch the EPL.
Yeah, exactly. But he's just been developing in big steps in the midfield of Montreal. Has really, thank you, Amanda, has really taken a lot big steps as every season goes. And he, last season it was cut short because of a concussion that he went into, but into a concussion protocol. But beyond that, it's he's the player to watch. There's been a lot of rumors that he might be going to the next player to go to Europe for Montreal. Montreal has already shipped some players to Montreal, so he looks like he's the next big target. So he's the player to watch. A lot of people are saying also Caden Clark, but I don't know if Caden Clark necessarily wants to go back to Europe. But yeah, definitely Nathan Saliba either has to light it up in the field this season, or it's going to be maybe another MLS team or just stay in Montreal until he figures it out.
Now, looking at this team, what would you say is probably, right, because this is just a guess, if you're predicting what would be the strength of this team and what would probably be the weakness of this team?
I mentioned the weakness. The weakness was the free kicks, the set pieces. Sorry, not the free kicks, the set pieces.
Yes.
Biggest weakness.
And then Edgar said Neil struggles there also. So
fun,
no hope with Neil.
Good stuff. so
Jalen Neil will be helping with that.
We did it
so
right.
What would be the strength?
But the strength, what I would say, would be that we have a core defense that's very young. I don't know if that makes any sense. They're very young, and there's a lot of potential there to become a solid line. Is their second year together. That's what I would say would be the biggest strength, because right now, like I said, we just have new attackers. Also, Caden Clark and Bryce Duke, if they can work that magic with Vrioni or Owusu, then man, we got something. But that back line, young with Jonathan Seroy and the goalie that also entering his third year, I want to say, or his fourth year. Very young kid also, and so it's gonna. That's what I would say would be the back line.
Now, coming off of what Wilfred Nancy did just a couple years ago with a bare bones roster, I mean, it's been a rough go since he left. What is the 2025 fan expectation going into this season?
You know what? There's a lot of fans are expecting Laurent Courtois to capitalize on that. On the end of the season last year, they want that to continue, that growth. You gave us a little preview at the end that really got us to the playoff. So a lot of people are excited, but they're a little, in a very Montreal way, they're very skeptical about the beginning of the season because Joseph Martinez left, and there's a big question mark at the number 9 position, right? So it's we still have Caden Clark and Bryce Duke, so that's always good. But at the same time, we need somebody to score the goal. So the expectations for the fans, I know I kind of went on a rant there, but the expectations of the fans would be to a continuous growth of what finished from last season. So
Omar's asking, is there a chance that Laurent moves on from the team?
You know what? There is a chance. I mean, he's also another, just like our players. He's a high potential coach. His assistant, David Sauvry, has been linked to already other MLS teams as also an assistant. So there's big potential. But this organization, sometimes they can, as they did with Fred Nancy, they can be very they can react in ways that are not very pleasant to a lot of the fans, and wish we were a little patient. But it's there is a chance that he moves on. I don't think he wants to stay. He's a Montreal lifer in the sense, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I just think he has a vision to go maybe to Europe, go back to Europe. He's from Lyon, right, France, and what an honor it would be to go back home and coach for your home team. Right? So.
Mitch is saying Montreal could be one of the surprise teams in the East. Honestly, the East is wide open. So, Andy, I come to you. Fandom aside, realistic 2025 prediction.
You know what? I was hearing at John before me, and I would agree with him that we're probably going to fight it out. But we haven't gotten that email yet of 30% back on the season ticket. So maybe
that was a wild email. That's a wild email.
I was like, whoa, a scoop. But but yeah, no, I can say probably realistically, everything depends on the first half of the season, Daniel. But we'll see. 9th, 8th, people are saying around that position.
You were there. I mean, look, I don't want to poo-poo on Joseph, but I think that Vrioni can give you some of what Joseph gave you. Did Joseph flip over any? There's no arroz con pollo over there in Montreal. So what was he flipping over last year?
Oh, you didn't hear.
Poutine?
You guys didn't make it to Poutine.
No.
Well, I mean, there was Laurent Courtois, the head coach last year. At some point, there was a big fight between the two of them where he said the famous quote. He said, "I give you my hand until you betray me," and he was talking about Joseph Martinez.
I did. I remember that quote. Yeah.
So that was the famous quote that it really struck the fans' heart. We're like, oh my God, Joseph is back at it again. Everything we heard in Miami, everything it's.
He was good in Miami.
Sorry?
He was good in Miami. He behaved.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Everything we heard in Atlanta, the problems that we had in Miami, we heard, but then again, I kept saying in our podcast, and I'll talk about it later, we kept saying, like, let's give Laurent a chance. Maybe he just was a little emotional or whatever, but he seemed to, at the end of the season, just kind of say, you know what, I'm going to play for myself. I'm going to play for me. I'm going to play for my contract.
Just my next contract. Yeah.
Let's just go ahead and do this. Whatever I got to do, put his head down. And like I said, just put in a performance game in and game out. Almost got us qualified further than the play-in. So,
man, you guys went down to penalties.
Yeah, against
that was close. Could you imagine? It would have been you that ends up eliminating Miami in the first round. You'd be feeling pretty good about yourself right now.
You know, I think that was the saddest part for fans. Forget about losing the playoffs, is that Lionel Messi doesn't go back to Montreal in 2024 for another game. That was the biggest loss. Yeah. But no, yeah, it was definitely sad, you know, because we were so close, we could taste it. But as it is with penalties. But don't get me started on penalties. But anyways.
All right, Andy, I appreciate you taking the time. This was a short 15-20 minute preview of CF Montreal. If you want a deeper dive and more in-depth talk about Montreal, Andy, let them know where they can find you so that we can keep growing this this MLS community.
For sure, guys. Yeah, go check us out Sunday nights. We do a live show on at 7:30 p.m. Every Sunday. We talk CF Montreal, Canada men's national team, Canada women's national team, and Roses FC, which is the new women's soccer team as well. So cool. Yeah, check us out. We're there with Hattie and Elias Gregoriadis. Thank you.
Awesome. I appreciate you taking the time to join, and I look forward to having you to talk when you guys come down to Miami. That's going to be a fun time.
Nos vemos.
All right, Andy, have a good one. All right, so let's see. We went back north, and now let's come now to the Midwest, Chicago, with my guy Nick. What's going on, Nick? How are you doing, sir?
Hey, Daniel. I'm doing real well, my friend. How have you been?
Living the dream, man. I'm here. I'm excited to talk Chicago. And before we talk 2024 and just the list of topics, how is Neymar fitting into Chicago?
You know, I think he really, really likes the nightlife here in Chicago, especially going out in the winter and enjoying all it has to offer at this time of year. But yeah, that was the story of the offseason here. It was, you know, it almost manifested itself out of nowhere that all of a sudden Neymar's linked to Chicago. There's reports that that fire personnel are in Saudi Arabia talking to him, which were completely false. Like ESPN Brazil did not get that reporting correct. But some of the fire executives were in London meeting with Neymar's representatives. There supposedly was an offer made that was substantially larger as far as dollars could go that Santos was offering him. So I don't know if he's going to end up as a part owner of that club at some point, or if he really just wanted to get back home and kind of live out his legacy there. But it was a real fun week and a half where Neymar was really considering coming to Chicago for a minute.
I mean, that would have been definitely the story of the offseason. But before we talk about this past offseason, let's go 2024. Another season, another missed playoff qualification. I think in the last 15 years, you guys have made it to playoffs. I want to say once. So it's been a rough go. And you had Kuipers, got to double-digit goals with, not the best of teams. You lost your coach. Could you sum up 2024?
Yeah, 2024, I called it the lame duck year because you had a roster that was in flux. You had a coaching staff that was in flux. Everyone knew Frank Lopez was not the long-term solution. He was not even the short-term solution. He was just the guy in the building who they knew they could count on to get on the sideline every game and submit the roster card. So it was a lame duck year. We saw Xherdan Shaqiri depart over the summer, a player that was never worth the price tag, never lived up to his hype or the expectations. So 2024, I'm glad it's over in so many ways. We just kind of had to suffer through it and just say, okay, hopefully there's a new plan. We did see the turnover in the front office and people kind of started raising an eyebrow. And then as people are already commenting here that we're bringing in Greg Berhalter to really turn things around. So the sooner we could have moved on from 2024, the absolute better. And I'm really glad that we did. And it's a completely new organization.
I will tell you, and I guess we can get into Greg Berhalter's talk. I don't think it was a bad signing. I mean, and I know for all the crap that people talk about his U.S. men's national team stay, he did I mean, outside of the World Cup, he won more than a lot of other coaches have with him. He helped develop, and maybe you could say that he stunted their growth. I don't know, but I felt like he was a part of the growth of the U.S. men's national team, this golden era that everybody talks about. In the MLS, I don't think that that's a bad hire. I think that he can develop some young guys. I think that you guys should be excited about Greg Berhalter.
Yeah, and as excited as we are about his coaching, we're equally excited about him stepping into the director of sport with the club. He is like the second highest person in this Fire organization now. He reports directly to the president, I'm sorry, to the owner of the club. So Greg has a dual role, and he is tasked with developing the team on the field as well as developing the organization from a sporting side. This has been something completely lacking from the Chicago Fire for many, many years. We're finally seeing the foundation of continuity from the youth teams to the academy to the next pro to the first team. If you're following along the Coachella Valley Invitational, the preseason tournament, they've got guys from their academy system, MLS Next Pro team, training with them and playing in that tournament. So they're already starting that pipeline. The club has put out a goal of saying we want 5 or 6 homegrown players on this senior roster. So they are really investing at all levels of the club. They have a brand new performance center that just opened up, some like $80 to $100 million performance center that is supposedly going to be tops in North America. I haven't seen inside of it yet, but everyone who's been there says that this is as much a recruiting tool as it is a performance and training center. So he's really developing the organization, but also we're finally going to get an identity as a team. It has been just in flux. How do we want to play? And you saw it in the last several years of players never being on the same page. How are they going to spark the offense? But with Berhalter, you saw that his first signing was a high-level winger, and he's going to probably play that typical winger-focused style or hit those long crosses. He's brought in some good outside backs as well. So we can get into that in some of your other topics. But, yeah, this Berhalter hire, I think, is great for so many reasons, and he can get back to what he loves, building clubs, building culture, and coaching up these players.
Before we get into the arrivals, the departures, I know Shaqiri didn't happen necessarily in this offseason. It happened a little bit before that, but you finally rid yourself of Shaqiri, which was a bust of a signing. Right. What was the biggest departure for the Chicago Fire this year?
From a talent perspective, there really wasn't anyone that I felt so bad that we lost. Personally, okay. I really miss Yorgos Koutsias, young Greek youth international striker. He was kind of the number 2, number 3 striker throughout his tenure here with the Fire. He is on loan to our sister club back in Lugano and off to a hot start. He's already got 2 or 3 goals for them. So I was sad to see him go, but at the same time, I don't think he was developing as quickly as they needed him to. And of course, a new coach is going to want to bring in his players. So as a talent perspective, there's no one I'm really missing. But from a salary and roster building perspective, obviously getting Shaqiri gone, getting that salary off the books, opening up a designated player spot is huge, as well as Gaston Jimenez. They finally moved on from him. This was a guy, I don't know how he kept failing upward into DP contracts year after year after year. But Gaston Jimenez is now gone. We have 2 open DP slots, one of which they filled this offseason in Jonathan Bamba, and then the third being Hugo Kuiper. So that's the biggest departure, and the fact that we were able to get those DP spots open.
Well, and then a delayed departure, John Duran. I know it happened a while ago, but then you guys still got paid for it. It's when he moved over to Saudi Arabia. So, I mean, that was part of the offseason, technically, also a little extra cash for you guys. Yep. Biggest arrival, I know you just mentioned it, Jonathan Bamba.
Oh, without a doubt. And about that John Duran, the sell-on money now has him as the most expensive outgoing transfer, the most lucrative outgoing transfer in MLS history. But yeah, Jonathan Bamba, the DP signing that came in, I had on my notes here that Berhalter was probably the biggest arrival, and we already kind of talked about that. But Jonathan Bamba is going to be, he's the designated player. He's going to be the creator. He's going to be a lot of the focus on offense. Coming over from Celta Vigo in Spain, he definitely has that creative playmaking ability about him. If you want to look on the defensive side of the ball, I'll say Jack Elliott, coming over as a free agent from the Philadelphia Union. the Fire gave up 62 goals last season. He needs to elevate the play of that back line. But
That was
also,
23rd worst.
yeah, not good in any respect. And I think he's going to also have a snowball effect paired up alongside Carlos Terán, who has all the physical gifts to be one of the best center backs in Major League Soccer, but his mental game isn't quite there yet. He can be quick to temper. He can kind of wander a little bit, but if he's got a good center back partner and a solid coach on there mentoring him, you're going to see those two center backs be a very effective pairing.
Now, as far as Triple G's formation and tactics, any idea yet on what it's going to look like on the pitch with the formation and with the tactics in general? Are you guys going to be pressing high, possession ball? What's it going to look like? We're going to see a lot of what he did in the U.S. men's national team.
I think we're going to see that as kind of his base. And so this is going to be familiar to a lot of people who've watched the U.S. or watched a lot of his Columbus teams. But Berhalter has said in all of his press conferences that they want to play exciting, up-tempo, all those sort of buzzwords that everybody loves to hear. But do coaches really want to do that? But I think he does. And he has admitted that his time with the United States men's national team has taught him he's got to be a little bit more flexible. You know, we saw those early games against Mexico where they kept trying to play out of the back and kept paying for it because they hadn't practiced it. So he has said that is a lesson he has learned. So I would expect to see a little bit of flexibility in his tactics and probably a little bit more freedom with Romanique Kwame, with Jonathan Bamba, with Brian Gutierrez, who got some USMNT minutes this January camp, giving them a little bit more freedom to kind of explore the midfield. But I do expect a 4-3-3. I do expect him to be very winger heavy. As I mentioned, Bamba's coming in as a winger. His first big signing, Philip Zinkernagel from Club Brugge, a winger. So you know that's where his focus is and that's where his bread and butter is as a coach.
And Kuipers could finally be looking at a better season since he had 10 with nothing. Now he's got wingers on each flank that could help him also.
Absolutely. And if you got $5 extra lying around, throw it on Kuipers as your Golden Boot winner preseason pick here. Like he could eclipse that 20-goal mark, I think, because he's a man that thrives on service. And if you look at all these new midfielders and wingers that they've been signing, Jonathan Bamba had a really good season for Lille back when they won the title 2021, I want to say. He was able to knock in a number of goals, but lately he and Zinkernagel, they're there to provide service for their strikers. So this could be a year of feasting and goal scoring for Hugo Kuipers.
I love that. I love that prediction. All right. Now, player to watch. Now, unless it's going to be Kuipers, what player would you say, look out for this guy? This guy might surprise you if you're not familiar with the Chicago roster.
Yeah, so Kuipers definitely on offense as the goal scorer. One of the new arrivals, Leo Barroso, coming over from Portugal. He's a Portuguese youth international playing as an outside back. So he might be a player that can surprise some people if they haven't been following, Sporting CP, Lisbon, whatever name they go by. I always forget which one it is. He came up with them, and he should be the starting outside back for the Chicago Fire, so he could surprise. But if you're interested in storylines as much as you are on the field, keep an eye on goalkeeper Chris Brady, because the Fire have such a deep goalkeeping pool in their first team and in their second team and in their academy that if there's a number that comes in, a $3, $4, $5 million transfer offer for Chris Brady, you could see him moving on to a bigger, better club and maybe pushing for like that fourth USMNT goalkeeping spot in the near future.
Yeah, shout out to Brady. I remember we heckled him quite a bit when you guys came down here.
Does not expect you would. Any good home fan should, right?
Yeah, but I know with the last name Brady, it just makes it so much easier. All right,
No
all right. So if you were to say a strength of this Chicago team, now I know the attack was a weakness. I don't know if now you think it might be a strength from what you said with Kuipers. What do you think would be the strength of this team? What could possibly be the weakness of this team coming into 2025?
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to reiterate the points we've made here. The strengths are going to be your goalkeeping and your wing play and hopefully the new attack. I'm going to temper that a little bit because they do need to gel as a team. That to me is the weakness and is going to be the question mark. How quickly can Berhalter get this solid culture established and get his team gelling together? They've had, I think, 11 new first team signings and 13 or 14 first team departures from last season. So they've flipped over at least half their roster. So the strength in all these new attacking players can also be their weakness too, where they got to get to know each other. They've got to get to understand where they're going to be on the pitch, how they want to play in Berhalter's system, and how creative they can be with each other.
And you didn't say strength, did you?
I think the attack is going to be the strength of the team, along with Brady in goal. But yeah, the strength, the new attacking players also could be the weakness as well. That's my like corporate interview question. Yeah. Like my weaknesses are my strengths. Like
hey, I get it. You are that guy. You got the interview down. Now, before we get into the fan expectations, I saw this and I'm curious. Nick's favorite Greek dish.
Oh, whatever my wife makes for dinner. That's my favorite Greek dish right there.
This guy has the correct answer, just like my strength is my weakness. There you go.
Yeah, she makes a great Greek style chicken. She does a great like macaronia with the little meat sauce, Greek style, like fantastic.
2025 fan expectations. Now, I'm assuming fan expectations are tempered, missing the playoffs as often as you guys have when you guys started so well as a franchise. What is the expectation for the fans, right? Not the realistic. What are the fans like? Give me this.
Sure. So at a bare minimum, we want to see a style of play, a defined style of play, some sort of identity when they take the pitch. We want to see a culture being built, something we can say like, yes, when we're looking at new players to come in, they will fit in with this bunch, both on and off the pitch or in the locker room and on the field. So those are kind of the intangible things that we as fans are looking for. But as far as results go, playoffs is the expectation. And even though we haven't made the playoffs since 2017 and haven't won a playoff game since 2009, I think, that I think should just be every MLS club's expectation. The fact that you're getting 7+2 playing teams, everyone should expect to make the playoffs. Unless you have those trophy aspirations.
And now, what would be the realistic? Like, where do you think this team's going to end up next season?
Yeah, for me, you are what you are until you're not. And that's how I look at MLS teams in development. So the Fire are not a playoff team, so I will put them in the play-in game, though. I think they can get to that 8 or 9 spot. That's what I'm looking for them this season. I expect a slow start. I expect them to pick up some steam when a lot of other clubs are playing in Leagues Cup and Champions Cup, and the Fire can rotate their squad for U.S. Open Cup. So I expect some points midway through the season. I expect a strong finish. And, yeah, 8th place I think will be a realistic spot for the Fire to conclude.
8th place, not bad. All right, Nick, now if you are a Chicago Fire fan or you just wanted to hear more about Chicago Fire and you want a more in-depth analysis, because this was just a quick 15, 20-minute preview. Nick, let everybody know where they could find you to talk a little more Chicago Fire.
Right. So I do the Feed the Fire podcast. It's out once or twice a week at least on the Believe Network or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow along with me on YouTube and social media at Glasshouse Soccer. Or if you want to just chat off the air, glasshouseSoccer@gmail.com. Happy to chat.
Now, and this is a serious question. I'm not joking around. In the summer coming up, I know Neymar's contract is only 6 months with Santos, and he's supposed to be a free agent. In Miami, people are expecting that he's going to end up in Miami. In Chicago, are there any rumblings of maybe we'll end up with Neymar in the summer, or is that just it was that week, and then you guys are like, that's it, it's never happening?
No, there are a few people who have said, like, yeah, this could still be, part 2 of the Neymar saga over the summer because of his short-term contract left with Santos. The question is, does Neymar want to come to Chicago over Miami? Now, Chicago had his rights. They were the club granted the rights to negotiate with him this summer. I don't know how that works because Chicago couldn't get the deal done. Now that opens the door to Miami. That was my tinfoil hat conspiracy theory where Neymar says, no, I'll go to Santos for a bit. Chicago loses their priority and now I can jump to Miami. So who knows what those roster rules are. Or if the league is going to say, no, you either come to Chicago or you don't come at all.
That's interesting. I can't imagine him in Chicago, but that would be interesting. Everybody wants to see the wealth spread out, so maybe we'll see.
Yeah, and now that we've got an owner who'll put his money up, we've got a great direction with Greg Berhalter. I think the league, there were some people out there who thought that Don Garber had it in for Chicago for a number of years. But the fact that we have, again, the owner, the coaching staff, and a clear direction, hey, they might throw us a bone now.
I'm going to ask you one last question just because it just popped in my head.
Yeah.
They're talking about possibly changing the calendar.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know how cold it gets in Chicago.
Yeah.
Is that something that Chicago fans have they even touched the subject? And would you be in favor of something like that?
Sure. It's mixed results with the fan base up here because as hot as it can get in the summer, that's how cold it gets in the winter. So you can play a 90, 100-degree game in Chicago in August, or you can play, in 10 degrees by the lakefront in December. So the weather is kind of a wash factor here in Chicago, but I would say personally, keep the schedule. I like how it's uniquely MLS, uniquely American, and that this is how we do it. And also, if I'm not going to be taking my 6, 7, 8-year-old kids to the lakefront when it's the middle of December, we're trying to watch a game. Like I've been to a Bears game when it's that cold. Don't want to do it with my family. That's for sure.
I look forward to summer soccer, so I'm with you on that one. But I know a lot of people, and I can understand why the pros to changing the schedule, but.
For sure.
I like the way it is. All right, Nick, appreciate you taking the time. Again, make sure that you join them if you want a more in-depth coverage of Chicago in 2025 season. And you'll be joining us throughout the year, I'm sure. So I'll see you I'll keep in touch, Nick.
Sounds good, Daniel. Thanks, man. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you. Have a great one.
You too.
All right, now, done with Chicago. Let's head a little further south to Music City, Nashville, with Mr. Uncle Mad. How are you doing, sir?
Doing pretty good. Happy to be back on with you guys, chatting Nashville SC and a little MLS this season.
Yeah, Nashville had a surprisingly off season last year because I felt like since you guys came into the league, and you guys came in with Miami, and Miami was I don't want to say jealous, but we were looking at if Nashville can do it consistently from the start, why couldn't we? And then all of a sudden you guys fell off a little bit. Could you just give me a recap of the 2024 season and what exactly you think happened there? Because you guys were winning because of your defense for the early existence of the team. And then once that fell off, everything fell off.
Yeah, I think last season was just kind of the hit your ceiling type moment where we had probably overachieved, honestly, the first few seasons realistically. Because, I remember going back to like the early days of Nashville SC, and I can't remember who it was, but I think there was some journalist that said we were going to be the worst expansion team since Minnesota United or something like that. And then we just kind of, came up. But nobody could have predicted, Hany Mukhtar being like an MVP level player. Some of the stuff we got us some retreads from other league teams and stuff like that. But, overall, I think we overachieved the first few years. We kind of kept running it back, kept trying to squeeze as much as we could out of that initial core of players. And last year was the kind of season where the dam broke, the, Gary Smith style of defense first, play for, 1-0 wins, play to keep it tight. Just kind of ran out of steam. And we, kept hoping that somebody was going to be that secondary player to Hany Mukhtar, and it just never really happened. So last season, he wasn't his best. Zimmerman was out for half of the season, and it all kind of fell apart. We fired Gary Smith halfway through the season. We hire an interim coach and let him coach like 15 games. It's like, nobody's going to do that well with that long of a stretch of like a guy who's not really in charge being in charge. But I think it was necessary for to kind of move us into the next phase of Nashville SC. You guys have been through it down there too, as well as, the coaching changes, kind of the overhaul of the roster. Once you get as much as you can of that first group. And then, we were lucky. Like I think I've said before, it's one of the things that made it hard for me to get into MLS before we had a team here in Nashville was it seemed like teams had these churns where they were just like overturning the roster so much. It was like, oh, who's even on the team this year? And it was a lucky thing to kind of be able to get familiar with the players, familiar with the team. But last year it was kind of, hit the wall, hit the ceiling, needed to break it, needed the dam to break and kind of move on to a new era, new team. And last year it was not fun. It definitely was not fun, but it was probably the necessary step we needed to take.
No, and like you said, Gary Ball was defend first, and then last year you guys were middle of the pack in defense. And when you're not scoring, you can't be middle of the pack in defense. You guys were second to last in goals scored, so definitely a rough watch last year. But now you guys got BJ Callahan, which is more possession based, I think, and I'm getting ahead of myself. But before we get into that, departures. Are there any departures that you would say in this past offseason that you would say this one hurts? I know you guys lost McNaughton, and I know in Miami, I saw a lot of people in the chat already asking about McNaughton. He's no longer a Nashville player. Any big departures that you feel like are going to hurt the team?
Yeah, McNaughton, public enemy #1 down there in Miami for so long. Yeah, he's gone. It really, I don't think there's any but one player that you would point to as being a significant departure. It's more the volume of players, and I don't know that it will hurt us because I think it was kind of time to kind of flip the roster, start building towards the next phase of the team.
Coach, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and that'll happen. First time we've changed coach. We've had basically the same core for the first 5 years. It was inevitable, but I mean, we probably have as many as like 8 or 9 players out, 8 or 9 new players in. McNaughton, was going to be a big name for, people that knew Miami, knew the Messi incident that happened. Probably the most well-known name is probably Shaq Moore. We traded him to FC Dallas, which now they're looking like they're loading up.
All of a sudden, yep.
Pretty formidable this year. But I think in Nashville, like that's not as big of a loss to us because I don't think we really feel like he ever played up to the expectations that come with like, a U.S. men's national team player, the salary and transfer fee and everything that he got. It wasn't bad. He wasn't bad here, but it's, I think it's one of those things in MLS, you have to be judicial with how you spend your money. And
Absolutely.
He never was quite, what he was getting paid to do here. So it's one where he's probably the most recognizable name that we let go this offseason. But I think most Nashville fans are kind of like, I think we'll survive and be okay moving forward.
As far as acquisitions, the biggest arrival, was there any arrival that you say this is the biggest arrival?
Yeah, kind of on the same wavelength of the departures. There's not that marquee, name that you're going to like pinpoint and go, this is the guy that's going to make Nashville SC headlines this season. But I think, across the board, we kind of, for every player that we let go, we brought a new player in that was, at least in some form or fashion, going to be a slight upgrade over the players we let go. We let, like I mentioned, Shaq Moore. We brought in Andy Nahar, who's a veteran MLS right back, who I think most people think he's going to be able to do as good of a job as Shaq Moore did there. So it's kind of a upgrade with a lesser fee. The player I'm probably most excited about, and I'm probably going to butcher his name because we brought in a bunch of like Scandinavian players, so I'm going to butcher their names throughout the season. But as Eddie Tagseth, I believe is, he's kind of like a midfield wing hybrid guy who can kind of play in a few different roles, and that seems to be a good fit for us because it seems like our new system is going to be a little bit more flexible in terms of formation. We've been doing a really great series on YouTube. The club has. It's almost like a Hard Knocks for Nashville SC's preseason called Maiden Goal.
I love when teams do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and each episode's kind of highlighted a player that's kind of been, new player or a player coming back, something like that. In his episode, I immediately was like all about him just because like he talks, he's Norwegian, came over from Norway. He sounds just like one of my all-time favorite players, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer from Manchester United. So I was like immediately like connected with him. I was like, I'm gonna like this guy. But just like on the field, it sounds like he's that kind of midfield attack combo player that's going to be able to connect, some of our stuff where whereas, it was kind of hoof it up to Hani Mukhtar and hope for the best. A lot of times he can maybe be a little bit more dynamic and give us a little something that we haven't had before. But that seems to be across the board. The profile of the players we're bringing in is that extra bit of something that we haven't had before where, had center mids who were really good defensively, but couldn't really do much passing wise. And now we're trying to get a little bit more versatility, a little bit more dynamicism through our players. But he's the one that like sticks out to me so far from everything I've heard preseason is that he's the one, he's not going to go out and be like a 30-goal scorer, like blow the score up, but he could be that kind of missing piece. We've needed that kind of extra thing we need to kind of open up more for Hani Mukhtar, open up more for Sam Surridge, create more in our attack.
They're asking if that show you're asking about, is it on TV? I'm assuming it's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube, Nashville SC's YouTube channel. It's Maiden Gold. I think they've had 3 episodes so far. Yeah, and it's not as quite as brutal as like Hard Knocks, where like they're bringing in people, cutting them or whatever. But it's just a fun way to kind of learn more about like they focus on kind of the new players that have come in, but they're also like kind of there's a lot with BJ Callahan, our general manager, kind of talking about what the new vision for the team is, how they're trying to move forward, like what they're doing. And there's some cool stuff behind the scenes of like because we go down to Florida for training camp. So there's some stuff with like the behind the scenes people, like how they have to pack up the goals, pack up all the equipment, like
Yeah.
down. So it's a pretty cool little. Yeah, they're like 20-minute episodes really quickly on YouTube. So it's just a fun little thing.
It's something that more sports franchises across the country are doing in all sports. I'm a Jets fan, unfortunately, but they also have something like that. It's called One Jets Drive, and it really keeps you engaged, right? Because even though you're not getting necessarily the hard knocks experience, it's definitely something to keep you engaged. That's really cool that Nashville is doing that. I wish more teams in the MLS would start doing that.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
You guys still have obviously the Canadian Messi Schafferberg. You have Honey Mustard. How are you feeling about the attack for Nashville? Because obviously it was week before with BJ Callahan. I'm assuming, well, I guess we could talk formation and tactics. What formation do you think you guys are going to come out in? And as far as tactic goes, I'm assuming it's going to be possession-based.
Yeah, so throughout the preseason so far, a lot of it's behind the scenes. You're just kind of reading reports and stuff like that. We did have one that was open season ticket members, which unfortunately I was not able to go to. But we've got some great people now that are covering the team day in, day out. They're like kind of giving reports and stuff like that. And we've played kind of a 4-2-2 formation throughout most of the preseason. Kind of it's been described as kind of a hybrid between what Red Bull New York has done traditionally, and what the Union have done, which makes sense because Callahan, before going to the national team, kind of came up through Philadelphia Union's coaching system and stuff like that. So it's kind of like a hybrid where it's a little bit of the pressing you'll see from Red Bull New York, but with that kind of narrow tightness you get from Philadelphia. So it's kind of a little bit of both. And he's talked throughout preseason. One of the big things he's stressing that's, I hear this from like a lot of coaches now are starting to kind of say this, they're starting to say more and more, we're not really focused on positions. We're not really focused on, formation. We're focused on roles. We're focused on responsibilities. So like they want to say like, this player's not necessarily a right back. He's covering the right quadrant or whatever you want to have it. So that seems to be where he's trying to shift it, where there is kind of a starting point for the team, which is the 4-2-2. But, the player who's starting at left wing could end up being more like a 10 throughout various parts of the match. The person who's in the double pivot could push forward and end up being more like a false striker at a certain point in time, depending on how game flow and stuff dictates there. So it's interesting from like, a fan perspective where we were pretty rigid, in the kind of 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3 Gary Smith style play to kind of see maybe there's going to be a little bit more fluidity, a little bit more creativity, definitely more pressing. We're not going to be like, like I said, it's not the full on Red Bull style of just like 90 minutes of chaos ball. There's going to be more pressing. There's going to be more attempts to control the game, control the ball, but it's not going to be, crazy full on Gingen pressing for 90 minutes either.
Okay. If there's a player to watch, right? Somebody might not be familiar with the Nashville roster, right? So like Honey Mukhtar is obviously a name everybody recognizes. If there's a player to watch that people should look out for, who would you just put out there? Like, look out for this guy.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost cheating because he is a designated player, but I kind of have some expectations for Sam Surridge to have a big season for us this year. He's our striker, our number 9. He came in midway through the 2023 season, kind of made a name for himself through the League's Cup run, had some big goals in that, but he's never, really fully hit the high levels that you'd expect, a number 9 designated player to have. But, that can also be understandable given the style of play we had and kind of the changes that have gone since he come here. But with the change in the style of play, with some of the players bringing in to have a more attack-minded approach, I could see him going from being a guy who scored like 10 to 12 goals a season to, pushing up 15, 16, 17, 18. Don't know that he'll creep into the golden boot race, but he's one of those guys. He can score in a lot of different ways. He's got the size to be like a poacher in the box on headed goals. He's got good striking ability where he can shoot with left or right foot. So he can score in a lot of different ways. So if we're able to create more opportunities for him this season, which it kind of looks like we might be able to, I can see him kind of, really for the first time kind of showing why we spent the designated player money on him.
And Mitch had a comment here, which I mean, he said Surridge has been a bust thus far. Now remember, Nashville with Gary Ball didn't really give you much opportunities in the attack. It was defend and Honey Mukhtar, go ahead and create your magic. I think that this season we'll have a better feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, for what Surridge could possibly do, or if he's that guy.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree. Mitch is completely right. He definitely hasn't, played to the level of a designated player thus far. But at the same time, I think a lot of that is kind of the team around him, the kind of style of play we've played, and that's why I'm kind of leaning into him as kind of my, player who's kind of off the radar that maybe, you know, if you're
Right.
not a Nashville SC fan, you might not have heard of, because I think he could go from 10 goals to 15 to 20 easily this season if things go well. You know, if this whole system, all these changes, these players don't plan out, it could be another disaster of the season. But, you know, if everything lines up the way we're hoping it does here in Nashville, I think he could have a breakout season and finally look like the player we signed him to be.
All right. Strength and weakness. And Tommy, thank you. I noticed this like an hour or so ago. Yes, there is a typo. Strength is misspelled. Appreciate that, Tommy. It is misspelled. Is there a strength for that you would say, you know what? And I know it's early. BJ Callahan just got here, but that you would project, you know what? This might be our strength. This might be our weakness.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the strength would be we've got a solid veteran group in the back line. So, you know, they're all probably on the wrong side of 30, but they're all, you know, proven players. Walker Zimmerman, our goalkeeper. Joe Willis is pretty good. Andy Nahar, our new right back, he's solid. So I think our defense is solid enough to where, you know, they can hold up. Yeah, they won't be the, you know, Gary Smith level, just win every game 0-0, win every game 0-0. But, you know, but, you know, they'll be enough to hold us in the game. Like I've talked with a bunch of other Nashville SC fans, and like if our attack kind of starts going the way we think it might this year, we're thinking, oh, we've had all these 1-0, 1-1 games for 5 years. We might start seeing like 4-2, 5-3 games where we're going to leave our defense a little bit more exposed, but they're a solid enough veteran group that, you know, you hope they can kind of hang tight enough to like just not get us run off the park on that side of the ball. So just the experience back there, I think, is good, especially because we're throwing so much newness into our attack, newness into our, you know, midfield and front line players. To have that kind of experience in the back line is probably the thing we can kind of rest our laurels on and kind of hope that's going to be our strength for this season at least, you know. But like I said, it is a little concerning. They're all 30, 31, 32. You never know when that, you know, moment's going to happen where it's like, oh, the legs just don't work the way they used to anymore. But, you know, it's a pretty solid group back there. If they can get us through this season, I think we'll be pretty solid with that group. And like Richard said in the chat, the ladies love Walker Zimmerman. He's super handsome. That's probably the best thing we got going for us, is having a handsome Walker Zimmerman.
Look, nobody's going to disagree with that one. That's a
I don't think
there.
I don't think my wife would have ever gone to a Nashville SC match, but like we had a special event before the first season where he got introduced right after we traded for him, and my wife was like, "Who is that guy? I want to go to the games with you if he's going to be there." So he's done well for a certain demographic.
There you go. Hey, get the butts in the seats, no matter how it happens.
Yeah.
What would the weakness be? Do you think it's just the unknowns with the attack, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, just, you know, we brought in a lot of players who, you know, on paper seem like they're going to be good, seem like they're going to give us something we, you know, haven't had before. But I think the bigger, you know, unknown to me is just BJ Callahan. You know, he's saying all the right things. He's got a good background, a good pedigree, you know, from where he's been as an assistant coach. But this is kind of the first, you know, rip the Band-Aid off. He's the full head coach. He's had an offseason to build the roster. This is going to be the BJ Callahan team. And we really don't know, you know, ultimately what that's going to look like. You know, it sounds good. It looks good. Everything, you know, always sounds good on paper before the season starts. But until you get out there and see it on the field, you don't know. And I will say the one weird concern I have about him, and this is not necessarily him, it's like our whole like organization, our general manager, our owner, everybody, they're using a lot of these weird like buzzwords. And anytime you say the buzzwords too much, I start to get a little concerned. Like they keep saying, we're building Nashville 2.0. We're building a team that's, you know, uniquely Nashville. You know, this is chapter 6 for Nashville SC. I'm like, and maybe that's just that we're having this YouTube series where I'm actually hearing them talk more than I've heard talk in previous seasons. But I'm like, I don't know, you see these buzzwords that don't really mean anything too much. So I'm kind of like, what's the substance behind it? That's a little bit, you know, concerning on the one side. But I would just say that our biggest, you know, weakness concern is just the unknown of it all, because this is the most turnover we've had in the roster. Obviously, the first season with a different coach, you know, from the start that we've ever had. So just the unknown of it all is probably the biggest concern, weakness we have going into the season.
All right. So you guys had a nice run when you first got into the MLS. Last year was a little off. Just strictly based off of fan expectations. What are the fans expecting this year?
Yeah, I think there's good buzz around the team right now, around Nashville, on, you know, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. Everybody seems to be a little enthusiasm that was definitely lost over the last couple seasons, you know, because I think people think even if we're not, you know, contending for, you know, top level trophies and stuff like that, the team will be playing a more entertaining style of soccer, which I think everybody's been desperate for here. Even I was a Gary Smith defender. I thought, hey, defense wins championships. Especially MLS where you got playoffs. You can score 0 goals and win an MLS Cup if you really put together the right stretch. But I think the fan base was ready for something different, ready for something to kind of spark, as I said, Nashville 2.0, and everything in preseason kind of sounds like it is going to be a more attack-based team, a more, try to generate possession, try to control games more. So I think the fans are generally enthusiastic. I think, you come off a season like last year, I think people are just going to be happy to have the team back and happy to see them play and hoping for the best. But, I think it was almost kind of a good thing to have as bad of a season as we had last year where the standard has been lowered, because we had a similar thing here in Nashville. I'm old enough to remember when the Titans first came here and we went to the Super Bowl our very first season. And that probably was good in that it really engulfed the fan base. But at the same time, it's like, well, wait, we're not going to the Super Bowl every single year. What is this crap? What is this not how this works? Yeah, exactly. Or ever again. Yeah. So I think it's kind of good to kind of get the expectations back, but then kind of also kind of make some moves, do some things to get the fan base excited. So, I think the fans are generally excited about the season, have generally high hopes. But I don't think it's going to be like a doom and gloom if it's not, going after the supporter shield or something like that.
Yeah, I thought BJ Callahan was an awesome hire. I think that he's going to do great for you guys. But all right, so just going strictly realistic predictions. What is your 2025 realistic prediction for Nashville? How many tournaments are you guys in? Are you guys just in the Open Cup?
Yeah, just in the Open Cup. And I know there's been a lot of criticism about how they've kind of moved teams out of the Open Cup and all that stuff. But I kind of like the format, honestly, where they've kind of staggered who's in what competition based on their previous seedings and stuff like that. Because I think it, opens the door for teams like Nashville, the teams that were kind of in that bottom tier, to kind of have the opportunity to go for a trophy, to kind of win something, whereas if everybody was in the competition, it'd be a little bit more clustered, a little bit harder to go through. And I think we've shown, different coach, different team, but obviously with the League's Cup a couple of years ago, we had a decent run there. We know we can go through a tournament and have a good run. And sometimes, I've seen in, other teams, MLS and otherwise, you win that first cup and it kind of gives you that believe on your shirt there, as you say, kind of shows you the path to win more. So I think US Open Cup for us this season, I think we should be able to make a decent run of that. Cause of the 8 MLS teams that are in there, we should be amongst the best ones in there. League wise, I think we should be back in the mix for playoffs. I think if everything clicks the way it looks like it should, there's no reason we can't be in that kind of 6 to 9 range. So many teams make the playoffs in MLS. It's almost, you have to be really bad to not make the playoffs. So I would expect us to be back in the mix there. If things, high ceiling, I think we've got a team that could hit that 4 to 6 range, but realistically, we probably are looking to maybe crack into that 7 to 9, get back to the playoffs, just kind of start the next phase of that. I'm using the buzzwords that they use in all the videos and everything. Nashville 2.0.
We're going 3 nights. We're doing 3 nights of just previews, all 29 teams that actually played last year. And today we did bottom of the table. I remember you messaged me when you saw it was bottom of the table. But today is the bottom of the table teams. And every single person has predicted 7, 8, 9, 10, in that range. And I think when you're in the bottom of the table, that's the hope, right? That's the next step as you progress up the table. So it's a reasonable prediction. I would say.
I think one of the things that's really hard to predict, just not only from a Nashville perspective, but just across the board in the league, is there's been seemingly a lot of change this offseason across the board for the league. We just saw, I think it broke today that Lucho is leaving Cincinnati, but then they're probably going to bring Vander in, and Cucho left Columbus. And there's just so many high profile players, even at the top, that are moving. It's if all this is happening at the top, what's happening in the middle? And it's easy to keep up with those, but to your point, I've been watching this stream to try to keep up with the teams that we're going to be in direct competition with. Cause I'm okay, I know what Columbus is doing. I know what Cincinnati's doing. I know what Miami's doing. All right, what's DC doing over there on the side? What's what's Chicago doing? What are the teams that we're going to be fighting with for those last couple spots doing? That's the teams I need to get up to speed with.
Well, and if anybody missed it, I think DC was the only one that was a little more down on the prediction coming into this year. So I don't think you got to worry about DC too much.
Well, I'll throw, if anybody in the chat or anybody around is still DC fans, they just hired our former assistant general manager to be their new general manager. So, if you like what Nashville's done in their inception, you're probably going to, maybe have some hope that maybe not this season, but you got somebody that's going to start building something for you long term. And our GM came from Kansas City, and they've done a decent job over the years of kind of having us. It's not so much recently, but they had a pretty long run of sustained success. So you might have something for the future. It might not be like the highlight. Like that's what I said. Like we don't have that highlight signing this year, but I like what we've done overall, and that kind of might be the path for DC in the future. You're not going to get the Wayne Rooney, the Benteke signing, but it might be these guys from Scandinavia that you've never heard of that are going to score 15 goals and be like, oh, that was pretty cool. That was a good season for us.
Look, and St. Louis gets a lot of those obscure Eastern European players, which we're going to talk about in a little bit with a guy from St. Louis. But you brought up the Believe, Nashville Believe. We got BatterFans.com. We got all the Believe shirts for all the MLS teams and other shirts also. So make sure that you go out and check BatterFans.com if you haven't already. Uncle Matt, appreciate you. If you are a Nashville SC fan or you just want a deeper dive into Nashville, because obviously this was a quick overview, Uncle Matt, let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, I mean, my socials are all Uncle Mad, 2Ds. I've got YouTube, Twitter, all the usual stuff. But I'll also shout out, we got a new local service. I'm not a part of them, but they've been doing a great job covering the team. 615 Soccer, great independent local coverage of Nashville SC. I'm more like, the kind of weird fan just watching the games and acting like an idiot. They're like the actual trying to be journalists, like really covering the team, really analyzing the team. So a lot of the stuff I'm saying here, I'm getting directly from them. So if you're somebody who's interested in like deeper dive into what's going on in Nashville SC, follow me. Obviously, I'd love to have the support. But 615 Soccer, they started, kind of a little bit earlier this offseason. They've been doing some really great stuff in terms of covering the team. So I'll share my plug with some other people.
There you go. Good looking out for shouting them out also. Uncle, as always, you are a go-to in Nashville. Appreciate you. And we'll be talking throughout the season.
All right. Best of luck. We'll see y'all soon.
All right. Have a good one, Uncle. All right. Now we are leaving Nashville and moving on to St. Louis with my guy, Chris. What's going on, Chris? How you doing, sir?
Good, Daniel. How are you?
Living the American dream. Here.
Good to hear.
So, St. Louis, you guys came out hot. First season, I mean, you caught me by surprise. I think most people by surprise. And then, but it felt we kind of came back to earth a little bit last year. Could you give me a recap of that 2024 season?
Yeah, it was, obviously not kind of what the fan base expected. I think Uncle Mad made a good point, which is, I was listening to his just now, where you kind of start to build expectations and all of a sudden it doesn't work out sometimes. So it was a lost season in a lot of ways. I think they got really exposed on having a lack of depth up front. They sold Nico Gioacchini to Como, kind of relied on Klaus and Adeniran up top, which Adeniran flamed out pretty early. So that kind of was, not an option. And then Klaus all of a sudden got hurt. And so all of a sudden you're down to almost no striker depth at all. They had serious injuries to Celio Pompeo, Tomas Ostrak, who had started to play very well. So they just ran out of offensive depth. I mean, at one point they were starting Notfi Thorsen at striker, a guy who is no longer in MLS and probably won't be back in MLS. So just, all kinds of issues on top of the coaching situation with Carnell. I listened to your guy from Philly earlier and I'm wishing him the best. We all like Carnell here. He's a great guy. But one of the big criticisms of him was that he had no plan B for anything. If teams could withstand the first 20 minutes of our press, we had no other way to beat you. And that was it. And so, ultimately, I think that it was just a messy season. I'm glad they kind of pulled the trigger on that move early. They brought in some pretty significant players in the summer transfer window. So they didn't wait to try to assemble this and fix it in the offseason. They tried to fix it during last year. They just kind of ran out of time. So it's leading into what we are hoping is going to be a much better year this year.
Well, I'm not trying to be funny, but as far as consistency, you were 24th in goals scored, 24th in goals against. Well, not 20. Yeah, I guess it's worse. So you guys, not the best defense, definitely not the best offense. But as far as departures go in this offseason, what was the biggest departure that you would say this is going to hurt the team?
Well, one of the things, real quickly, to speak
Yeah.
to your point that you just made about the defense, when you have no offensive presence at all, it's very easy for other teams to just attack you without fear, and
Right.
so that was one of the reasons their defense was so bad, is just because they had no way to threaten you, and so teams would just not care. They weren't afraid of anybody that we were throwing out there. So that's kind of what I think played a big part of that. So as far as biggest departure in the offseason, anyways, it's probably Jose Kojima, who was a super draft first round pick that they had last year, who played very well for them, filled a lot of different roles, has an extremely bright future. But unfortunately, he was a victim of the same thing that City did with a player that you know very well, which is Jake LaCava. When City drafted LaCava and immediately turned around and traded him to Inter Miami. So the same thing happened with Kojima. Kojima was drafted by San Diego, who immediately flipped him over to DC. Now, Kojima probably would have been buried this year on the depth chart. So he would have had probably way less opportunity to actually get minutes this year. So from a perspective of a fan of his, a lot of us in St. Louis really like him. He might be the smartest player in all of MLS. The guy is just a soccer diehard, he's incredible how in depth he understands the game. And I actually spoke with him once. He wrote a 60-page paper in soccer on futsal strategies in college at Wake Forest. So the guy is just a super nerd when it comes to soccer. So DC is getting a guy that we're going to be rooting for from afar, but he's probably the biggest from a name perspective and an impact. At least last year, it's Jose Kojima that they're losing.
Yeah, 60. Wow, well, that's pretty cool. As far as arrivals go, who was the biggest arrival?
Well, the obvious answer would probably be Olaf Melberg, the new coach, right? That's probably the biggest, easiest answer. But the one from an on-field perspective is probably Conrad Vallum, who is their new left wing back, Norwegian kid. They brought him over from Slavia Prague on a loan with an option to buy. He has looked phenomenal in the first 2 preseason games. They have extremely high hopes for him. He has a relationship previously with Melberg. So this kind of speaks to like a guy that Melberg was like, yeah, if I'm going to St. Louis, this is one of those guys that I know about that maybe not a lot of people do. And so when you look at what their potential wingback situation could be with Vallum on the left and potentially Thomas Totland on the right, that's pretty solid at this level. So it's something that I think he's going to really make a name for himself in this league. Conrad Vallum will. So
Inter Miami has it's always linked to South Americans. They just for South Americans.
Yep.
St. Louis seems to be going the Eastern European route.
I wouldn't say Eastern European as much as Germany, period. Yes, we do have a lot of Scandinavian players. We have a few Eastern Europeans, but mostly, we get a lot of grief for being a team that's trying to win the 2 Bundesliga instead of MLS. Right? We have a sporting director that is German, who still calls games in the Bundesliga for ESPN. He's Derek Ray's color commentator. So when you tune in to watch Bundesliga games, you're usually hearing Derek Ray and Lutz Pfannenstiel, who's our sporting director. So, so he has a lot of connections still in Germany, even though he played on every continent professionally. He still has a lot of connections back to the Bundesliga. So, yes, guys like Marcel Hartl and Cedric Teuchert and, guys that, Timo Baumgartner and so Jonas Horn, we can just keep going with Klaus was in Germany. So yes, I mean, it's a lot of guys that are coming from that area of the world. And the familiarity with those guys, a lot of those guys, Teuchert, Hartl, Edward Leuven, they all played juniors together. They're on the German, youth teams together. So hopefully that translates into familiarity and playing together, at this level. So
no, I mean that's interesting. I didn't know that. That makes sense now.
Yeah.
So as far as formation and tactics go, I know you got the new coach in.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of formation are you guys going to be rolling out, and what kind of game are you going to be playing?
It's going to be really interesting to see what Melberg does, because he's not really been a guy in his past. We did a lot of analysis of him when, City announced his hiring. of trying to figure out exactly what he is and how he coaches. And he's not really tied to any specific formation. He's not a guy that you can port to, like obviously when we had Carnell, it was like, okay, they're going to press and that's his style and that's it.
Right.
So we've seen already in the preseason 3 in the back, whether it's a 5-3-2 or 3-5-2 or whatever you want to call it. We've seen a 4-3-3 already. Like, I don't know if necessarily he's tied to any specific formational strategy. I think their personnel would lead more towards a 3 in the back, 3-5-2-ish style. But I think you're going to see a lot of dynamicism and just flexibility. I know some of your other guests have kind of thrown that out and said, well, we're going to see a more flexible, lineup. I think they're kind of in the same boat. I think Mellberg is going to take, one of the things that was a real weakness for City last year was our depth, like I talked about, especially up front. If we have everybody healthy this year, it's going to be completely opposite. We'll be one of the deepest teams in MLS. When you think about guys like Celio Pompeo, is going to, who had really kind of broken out and had a great year last year until he got a horrible leg injury. He's going to be fighting for minutes. He's not a guaranteed starter by any stretch of the imagination. Thomas Ostrak was playing well. Indiana Vassilev got a call up to the men's national team, U.S. men's national team in the last window. He's going to be fighting for minutes. He's not a starter. So they're going to have a lot of depth. And if Klaus plays well up top with Teutsch, then, Simon Betcher, who came in midseason for us from, who played in Vancouver, who was a St. Louis University guy, he's going to be fighting for minutes. There's going to be a lot of competition on this team for minutes. And I think that's a good thing. You always want that kind of competitive spirit around the club. And so their depth is going to be an advantage. So it's going to be really beneficial for Mellberg to be able to play different styles depending on who we're facing, because if he needs to throw out more defense, he can. If he needs to throw more midfield, he can. If we need to go more attacking, he's going to have the bodies to do that. So,
as far as for anybody that's not familiar with St. Louis, if you were to say there's a player to watch that maybe he's not a household name in the MLS right now, do you have a player that you say you look out for him?
Only because I don't know how many people watched St. Louis towards the end of last year when we were already basically out of the playoffs. Marcel Hartl.
Okay.
Marcel Hartl is a guy that they brought in. He played 9 games with City. He had 8 goal contributions in those 9 games. He had 3 goals and 5 assists. He was everything that we could have hoped for. Initially, people were a little disappointed because we were for at least a little while in the running for Marco Royce until Royce's wife apparently said, I don't want to live in St. Louis. I'd rather live in LA, which is understandable. It's LA, right?
He would have fit in with the Bundesliga, though.
Yeah, we're not, and he's real close buddies with Roman Berkey. That's why we kind of thought, oh, okay, we might have a chance at him. But so Hartl was the guy that they kind of pivoted to, and was coming off a season where he helped St. Pauli get into the Bundesliga from the 2 Bundesliga, and I would be absolutely shocked, assuming he stays healthy, which is never a given. I would be shocked if he's not an all-star. He is fantastic. On the ball, off the ball, he's going to be their PK guy. He's going to take all their corners. He is a DP in every sense of the word. And so a lot of people may not know him because he doesn't carry a huge name. He doesn't carry he didn't come from a huge club. It was St. Pauli, who again had just been promoted. It's not like he's coming from a Bayern or, one of those, elite clubs in Germany. But I think Marcel Hartl is going to be their guy that you look at the end of the year and go, yeah, he was their most indispensable player.
That's a great pick. So, I'm looking at the depth chart. So you guys are finally, because Pompey just says he's going to be back from injury.
Yep, him and Ostrak both
should be back.
They both played in the last preseason game, so they're back.
Vassilev is a backup. Okay, all right. St. Louis might be looking good again. So if we're talking strength, what would be the strength? And I know it's misspelled there. I've had it pointed out to me a few times.
I know Tommy was all. That's okay.
What is the strength of this team if you could pick a strength and the weakness? I guess strength would be Burke,
Well, yeah, if you want to talk about one guy, it's Roman Berkey, especially Roman Berkey playing in a contract year because his contract is done at the end of this year. So you don't know if he's playing or is motivated to.
There's no chance of an extension before the end of the season?
I mean, they're going to try. They're flat out going to try. There was some interest already from FC Copenhagen, which Lutz van der Steel kind of, immediately turned down and said in this press conference He will be here through the end of the year. We're not moving him. We're not moving him in summertime. So, obviously, as our captain, as basically the face of the franchise, yes, the fans are kind of demanding that they get a re-signing done. Assuming he wants to stay. You never know. You never know if he wants to go back to Europe, if he wants, if he again would prefer to live somewhere else more glamorous. You don't know, but I think a Roman Berkey motivated to get that next big contract is obviously our biggest strength. I said, if you're not just talking about one player strength, then it's the depth. It's the depth. The only area really where you could point to and say, okay, they don't have extremely high quality depth might be at striker, but that's dependent on Klaus. Klaus in the first year looked really good, then he got hurt. And last year he did not play well at all and got hurt. So, it depends on, can he stay healthy? Can Simon Betcher still continue to produce like he did last year? And Cedric Teuchert, who, if Hardo hadn't come, would have been the player to watch, because I think Teuchert's going to have a phenomenal year as well. But he's the other kind of guy who just, you're hoping that Teuchert is not a traditional striker. He wants to play underneath the striker. So he's going to get a lot of those dirty goals, those rebound goals, which he already did last year. And so, that's another guy that I think if you're talking about a pure, up top striker, it's all kind of dependent on Klaus. And so everywhere else, I think they're deep. And so, Berkey, from a single player depth of the overall squad, I think is from a global standpoint, their strength.
And if you had to say that there's a weakness on this team, would you say that there's a weakness somewhere?
Well, it's I'm not going to be completely delusional for a team that didn't make the playoffs and say, oh yeah, we have no weaknesses. That's insane.
Right.
The weaknesses are, again, will we get the goal production out of the 9? You don't know. You hope. Will we stay healthy? Because that was a big problem last year, a huge problem last year, was staying healthy. Hopefully the style that we're now playing, no matter what it is, it's not going to be near as high pressing and running as what Carnell had us playing, because that was a concern for a lot of us. When we were halfway through that first season and we started to see the team wear down, we're like, you can play that style maybe if you're a Vancouver and you play inside, or Atlanta, you play inside, or Minnesota and you're playing a little cooler weather, but we have horrendous heat and humidity here in the summertime, right? And you're asking these guys to run all over the place and press all season. That's a lot, and you just run these guys into the ground. Right. So, I think that the style, I think, should hopefully fit our personnel better and vice versa.
Okay.
And so going back to the weaknesses, sorry. So weaknesses. So I think obviously the production up top in the 9. And then I think that the other kind of question mark is, how does your coach who's never coached in the MLS adapt to coaching in MLS? It's a lot of travel. It blows these European guys' mind how much they have to fly, because they're not used to that. Yep. They're used to taking trains everywhere. So I think that's the biggest weakness, is just the unknown of how does he handle coaching in this league, and the demands and the travel and the schedule congestion and all that stuff, and how does he utilize his roster. He has a reputation of a guy that is really good for clubs that are developing younger players. Our academy is just kind of in the early phases, so it's not like we're churning out a bunch of guys yet. It looks like Chris has a question. Vasilev, yes, I know that Danny is not a fan of Indiana Vasilev, as I learned the last time I was on in the fall with you guys. So he's fine. He's doing very well off of his U.S. men's team invite, and he got his first cap, which was really cool. So, so weakness, I think, the up top, and then the unknown of the coaching. So,
I was going to ask you something, and then Chris's question threw me off. So I guess I'll move on to as far as just the fan perspective. What is the expectation from the fans going into this year?
Expectation from the fans this year. Well, so I can answer it in kind of a 2-part answer. So
go for it.
There's going to be one part of it that's going to be the expectation every single year, and that's to beat Kansas twice. That will be forever and ever, for as many years as we have a team, as many years as this league exists. It's beat Kansas twice. It's sweep Kansas, many points. That is our rival. That is, period.
Shouldn't be too hard this year.
It's the yeah. Well, I'm hoping. I always make the joke that our favorite sporting director is Lutz Pfannenstiel. Our second favorite is Peter Vermees because he's running that franchise into the ground and we love it. So, go right ahead, destroy it all you want. It's fine. So, it's almost like a Michigan, Ohio State football situation where if you beat them, it somewhat saves a bad season. Last year we didn't lose to them. That was kind of the only bright spot in a bad season was like, yeah, we went out there and tied, we beat them here. Like we didn't give them, they didn't beat us. So again, it was, that's always going to be an expectation is beat Kansas twice. The other one is make the playoffs. I think there's absolutely no reason, assuming they stay healthy, that this club as currently consisted should not make the playoffs comfortably. Like I'm not saying they're going to win the West. Like, that was a dream thing that happened in the first year, but right. Expectations wise, and we'll get to the prediction in a second, I know, but I think expectations are playoff team for sure, and then obviously beat your rival twice. So,
and then like you said, 2025 realistic prediction. Where do you think this team ends up? Are you guys? How many tournaments are you guys in?
Just the Open Cup.
Just the Open Cup. Okay, you guys are just in the Open Cup. So, what is the realistic prediction going into 2025?
If I had to say, put money on it. I thought about this question, when you said this is what we were going to talk about. I looked at who we play out of the East, the kind of unknown strength of the West. Obviously you've had several guests mention the Lucho move and, and who knows if Evander is going to go East and how that would shift things for Portland. So there's a lot of things up in the air, but I think, and last year I did a lot of picking of City between 3rd and 6th, and obviously that didn't go at all correct. But if I had to guess this year, I'd say 5th. I think they're a middle of the pack club. I don't know if they'll start great because again, they're going to have to adapt to this new system and this new coach. So I think 5th is reasonable. Maybe fighting for that last, home playoff spot in 4th. But again, I think one of the things they probably learned as an organization, hopefully they learned from year one, is that you don't have to win your conference to have success in the playoffs. Right?
Not in MLS.
As you guys know, last year, as
means nothing.
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything, right? And I think that was one of the things that they got so hung up on chasing in year one, in trying to win the West and trying to finish first and being the first expansion team to ever do that. And that they ran themselves into the ground. They didn't rest their players. They just, they didn't rest Berkey. He played over 30 games that year. Like he was toast by the end of the season. And so I think organizationally, hopefully they've learned that, hey, we don't need to, burn everybody out just to finish, one spot higher. You can, as long as you're in, you have a chance, and as long as you're in the playoffs, you have an opportunity to win a cup. Right. And so,
just get in the dance.
I think 5th. Yeah.
All right. Make sure, look, I'm talking St. Louis. Check out the St. Louis Believe shirt. Make sure BatterFans.com. We got all the teams Believe shirts. Chris, we did 15, 20 minutes real quick preview, but make sure, let everybody know they can find you if they want a more in-depth St. Louis Soccer City talk.
Yeah, so my website is stlsoccernews.com. And what it basically is just an aggregator and a reference for soccer in St. Louis. One of the things that your listeners, fans might be interested in is we aggregate not only all the content creators in St. Louis, we have over 20 podcasts in St. Louis that cover soccer. And so that's something that, we're very proud of, all of our content creators, not only on the podcast side, but YouTubers and writers and analysts and all kinds of different things on that side. But also we've also aggregated every other city's podcasts and YouTubes and content creators. So it's one gigantic list that if you go there, you can actually say, okay, I wonder, can I find the podcasters from the Galaxy or Inter Miami or NYCFC? We have them all listed, with the exception of one city who I won't name, which you can probably guess. We don't care about those guys, but everywhere else, like it's a pretty comprehensive list of content creators all over MLS, and so it's something we're very proud of. And in addition to covering just the St. Louis soccer and the stuff that's going on here locally, we also try to expand and get the point of view of when we're looking and playing against other teams. We want to see what those fans are saying as well. So,
awesome. Chris, Appreciate you taking the time to join me on tonight's little MLS preview marathon.
Of course.
Best of luck, and we'll be talking throughout the season.
For sure. Have a good one. Thanks, Daniel.
All right. Have a good one. All right. And then we move on to the West Coast for our final preview of the night. We have the San Jose Earthquakes with Fabian Ranquel. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, what's up? Hey, West Coast, Best Coast, baby. No, no, thank you so much for having me back on. It's good to see you, Danny.
Yeah.
It's been a wild preseason, that's for sure.
Absolutely, and especially with all the signings. I don't remember there being so much movement before our season starting, and maybe it's just recency, but
it could be the transfer window moving too. So
yeah, because I just think that it's been wild. But we're here to talk San Jose Earthquakes 2024 recap. Do you want to recap the 2024 season, because it wasn't great, and a historic amount of goals allowed, worst defense by far in the league. They were 24th in goals scored, ended up last place, wooden spoon winners, last place in the West Coast, somehow only managed 21 points the entire season. So, 2024, Fabian, what the F?
Hey, this is the new Inter Miami of the West Coast. I'm just going to say that. I'm kidding. It's going to be the team to beat, to be honest. Hey, what's up, Tommy? Yeah, the Quakes are going to be the best team in Leagues Cup. Wait, hold up. They're not in it? All right. I'm excited now.
Well, wait. Where are you guys in? Are you guys in
U.S. Open Cup?
That's it?
The best domestic tournament of all time. All right. So
I mean, you guys did win the wooden spoon. I don't know why I was expecting to see you guys in anything else. That's where the Open Cup. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, Chicho Arango is now in the fold. All I know is the Bay Area or San Jose is buzzing for Chicho Arango. I think a lot of fans don't really know how big that is, but then once you say he was toe-to-toe with Lionel Messi, I don't know if you've ever heard of that guy, but he was toe-to-toe with Lionel Messi for the first half of the season. Then they start to get excited. And who's this Chicho Arango guy? Yeah, exactly. So, no, it's going to be a good time. Bruce Arena has this fan base completely buzzing, to be honest. A whole bunch of guys came in from the New England Revolution, and we were thinking, man, this is the worst offseason I've ever seen in my life. We're going to bring 6 guys in from the worst team in the East, and then we're going to send guys over there too. But no, honestly, getting the best trade of the offseason has made this all worth it. Bringing in a guy who very well, Josef, that I think still has some juice in him left, is also a great move. I was actually clamoring for it at the beginning of the offseason. I said the Quakes should go ahead and sign this guy because he killed it in Montreal. The Quakes need a striker. So, no, I'm excited for the team. Everybody here is excited for it. I think we have a lot of ground to make up from the last couple of years, but it's definitely going to be a fun ride.
We had, I don't know, tonight's been a long night. I didn't realize how exhausting this would be. But a couple hours ago, we had Andy from Montreal on talking to us, and he was really disappointed about losing Joseph. Like, they really fell in love with Joseph over there. He was saying he doesn't know if they can reproduce what he was giving them on the pitch. Because, like I said, while he was down in Miami all the time, he gives you more than goal scoring. His IQ, the intelligent runs he makes, the space he creates for other people are things that people don't put into account. And he's going to be doing a lot of that for Chicho if they play together. And we're going to get into that in a second. I know 2024 recap, there wasn't much to say because it was just absolutely dreadful. Departures. Were there any key departures? I'm doubting also, but were there any key departures from the team last year?
Yeah, look, I mean, they lost a lot of fan favorites, to be honest. Jeremy Abobasi was a fan favorite. Jackson Ewell was a fan favorite. JT Marcinkowski was a fan favorite. So definitely guys, good people, good locker room guys, unfortunately left. But with Bruce Arena coming in, you need to make space for Bruce's guys. And unfortunately, they all got the axe.
And as far as biggest arrival, I'm assuming Bruce Arena has to be the biggest arrival, right?
Yeah, Bruce Arena and Chicho Arango, I think, share that title. I think Chicho Arango is huge. I mean, that's an MVP candidate. Josef Martinez is a former MVP, so let's not forget that either.
Absolutely. No, you don't disrespect the king. All right, as far as the formation goes, is there any chance you see 2 strikers up top If not, what formation? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so at Coachella, they've actually played with 2 strikers up top. So Josef and Chicho, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, have played every single minute together. They came
That's
in.
exciting.
Yeah, no, definitely. They came in at the second half together, and then they played the first game together from the start. So they have played on the pitch together, and I'm interested to see how that turns out. I'm interested to see if Christian Espinoza can get on the same page as Chicho.
Pellegrino.
And Pellegrino on the other side. But to be honest, Chicho loves to have the ball at his feet. So it's like usually the ball's coming in from Espinoza. Espinoza is he has the most assists in club history. So usually likes to cross the ball in. So can Chicho Arango adjust? Will he get enough service? Does he like the ball like that this season? So it's going to be interesting to see if the chemistry between Espinoza and Chicho Arango can truly work out.
As far as tactics, do you have any inkling on how Bruce Arena is going to be playing the ball? Is it possession based? Go ahead.
Sorry. I'm too excited.
No. I'm glad. Go for it. I love it.
So basically, they were playing 3 at the back, and they had Mark Anthony Kaye running kind of like the bulldog, and then basically Hernan Lopez just being a free roamer, or Nico Securis, the younger guy, in that role, kind of free roaming to see if he can find some outlets. But they really were going through the right side. They were overloading the right side of the field with Espinoza, and I would say expect that this season. But 3 at the back is different. They were playing with wing backs. So were we going to see that for the first game of the season, or are we going to see a normal 4-back? So it's something interesting. Bruce is cooking, and he's not just cooking on the field for the Quakes. I mean, he's already added a press conference, a banquet hall, a whole bunch of needed additions to make the players feel like it's a professional team. So with the players feeling like they play for a professional team and the attitude's up, confidence will only go up.
And like we said, the defense was that worse than history? Like if it wasn't, it was up there.
Definitely. And that was because we lost Daniel. Daniel is one of the best goalkeepers in this league. And in the year before, in 2023, he was one of the best goalkeepers, I think top 5, if I'm not mistaken. But he went down with a season injury. And then we had to go ahead and change it all up. And then from there, it went downhill. Luchi Gonzalez got fired. And then it just went downhill. The locker room was lost. Espinoza was trying his best to, keep the locker room together. Hernan Lopez came in, had 6 goals and 2 assists. But for half of a season, if you double that, that's not too bad of a season, right? So, no, the Quakes are doing exciting things. If they can keep Hernan for this season, that's something definitely a plus, especially with Lucho Acosta going to Dallas today. I don't see Hernan leaving.
No, for sure. And Dave Romney came in from New England. I mean, they had to do something with that defense because that defense was atrocious last year. So if you had to say there was a player, like people that aren't familiar with the roster, if there's a player that you would say, look out for him. I mean, Christian Espinosa might be an unknown here on the East Coast, but just in general in the MLS, is there a player you would say, watch out for this guy? He's going to possibly be a baller and a household name by the end of the season.
Yeah, look, I'll start with this. Espinosa could be a top 10 player in this league by far. I mean,
and a lot of people don't know him.
Yeah, exactly. He's not a household name in this league, and he was an MVP candidate, I think, last 3 years. So it's something where Espinosa becomes a little bit more with notoriety because he has Chicho playing alongside him. He finally has a Batman to him being Robin, right? It's nice to see that. But another guy to keep an eye out for is Nico Securis. He's a guy who played for the U20s as a 17-year-old, and he's a baller. I mean, this guy is the next up for the Quakes to kind of move on to Europe. So he might be in line for a breakout season. Also, you're going to see Cal 44 this season for the Quakes, and it's not Cade. It's going to be his little brother Chance. And his little brother Chance scored in the second minute in that crazy 22-0 game last night. So they're expecting him to get some minutes with the first team this year too. So another Cal 44 tearing it up for San Jose again. And
the first player that you told me to watch for, what was the name again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Nico Securis.
What position does he play? Because I've never heard that name before.
Sure, he plays the 10. So he plays a 10 and an 8. So he's a player that, he as a 17-year-old, he was on the U20s. So he's definitely talented. So this is a guy who they want to make the next step for the Quakes. And he was playing for Hernan Lopez at Coachella, and we'll see. I mean, he's probably going to get a lot of minutes this season.
So if I were to ask for a strength of this team, because Bruce Arena, look, I expect them to be a playoff team just because Bruce Arena succeeds wherever he goes. But if you were to tell me what's the strength, just predicting it, right? Because obviously we haven't played any games, and weakness, what do you think the strength might be of this team? What do you think the weakness might be?
Yeah, like the strength, I think, is going to have to be the offense. I mean, shoot, maybe you could beat teams 4-3 every game, and that would
There
be
you go.
exciting soccer, and a W is a W. But no, if you have Chicho Arango, Espinoza, Hernan Lopez, Josef, and Pellegrino, I think you're looking on paper. You're looking
solid
not
attack,
yeah, you're not looking too bad as an attack. Their weakness is definitely going to be the defense. I think you could still bring in a center back from MLS. I mean, I have to see how Romney fits into this side. I have to see how Kay fits into this side, but possibly your midfield could be a little weak as well. So, hey, if the offense has the ball and is just putting the pressure on and always
an exciting watch.
Yeah, the Quakes are going to be a fun watch this year for sure.
So as far as the fans go, I mean, Wooden Spoon, I don't know where expectations could possibly be from the fan side. What have you heard from fans? What is the fan expectation going into the 2025 season?
Yeah, the fans think the Western Conference is wide open, to be honest. They think that LAFC didn't get better. The Galaxy are dealing with a lot of injuries.
The Galaxy have reloaded pretty nicely. I don't know.
but Painsel's out for another 8 weeks, and then Ricky Puig is going to be
That's right to start the season, yeah.
So you could steal some points there. The Dynamo aren't going to be as strong. St. Louis, the Sporting Kansas City's not going to be right. So the Quakes think the fan base is really optimistic, to be honest. And this is the first time the fan base has been optimistic since Matias Almeida. I mean, so watching Matias Almeida go on and win, or at least win a championship with the team from Greece, and then going off into Champions League soccer, it's like watching your ex-girlfriend live her best life. It's not fun to see. So the Quakes are finally like, you know what, our ex-girlfriend's living a good life, but we landed our bully's girlfriend. All right, we landed Bruce Arena, right, our biggest rival's best head coach. So they're definitely excited. They're going to see where it goes. But yeah, no, Quakes fans' expectations, I would say, is a home playoff match. That's a good expectation for the team, and I think the fans are excited.
I think that's fair. All right, so let's get on to the actual prediction. What is your 2025 prediction going into this season?
Yeah, I think the Quakes kind of land in that range that I was saying. I think they land fourth in the Western Conference. I think it's going to be –
Are they the best team in California?
Maybe for the first 8 weeks while Painsel's out.
Okay.
But the Galaxy are very strong, and they're just going to get stronger with Ricky coming back. If they can hold on to Peck, it's going to be hard. But some question marks in the back line make the Quakes not the best team in California. So to be honest, being second in California is good enough.
Oh, that's solid. That's pretty solid. Fabian, I can't thank you enough. This was a quick 15-20-minute preview, but if you haven't already, make sure you follow Fabian. Fabian, let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me at Fabian Rankle, or on Instagram, I am Fabian Rankle, or you can follow Footwork Magazine. So we're doing a lot of things at Coachella and all around the MLS. So if you want to see cool soccer photos or cool soccer stuff, definitely follow Footwork.
And when it's time for Leagues Cup, Fabian is the best person to follow.
Hey, U.S. Open Cup too. I'm going to try my best to do both.
There you go. All right, Fabian, I appreciate you joining, and I'll catch up with you throughout the season.
See you soon, bro.
All right, man. All right, and that does it for tonight's stream. We are done. That was a lot longer than I expected, or a lot more exhausting than I expected. I appreciate everybody that hung out with us live. You guys were awesome in the chat. We went through 9 teams and one yesterday, which was San Diego. So we've gone through the first 10 teams, the bottom of the table. Tomorrow, we start with the middle of the pack, the mid-table teams, the ones that are hoping to move on, the ones that are still believing that they can move on to the top of the table. So that should be fun. That will also be here on YouTube. And so if you haven't already and you're still on here, make sure that you subscribe to the Battered MLS fans and like the video if you haven't already also. We appreciate you hanging out with us. And again, we will be back. And by the way, for those of you that want to, there are going to be timestamps if you want to go back and listen to any of the the teams over, and over the weekend we will cut these up and put them up as their own separate videos to make it a little easier to find for those of you that are interested in just specific teams if you want to watch it over. And make sure that you follow everybody that joined as a guest. I appreciate every single one of the guests that joined. I know it wasn't easy. Want to map this out and plan it out, but I appreciate that everybody came and everybody got on here on time. So shout out to everybody, because that made it that much easier and smoother. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And again, we'll be back tomorrow. Today we did 9 teams. Tomorrow is 12 teams. So a little longer stream, an extra hour. And I'll make sure to bring some extra water because it is a lot. But I hope you enjoyed it, and we will be back tomorrow. Again, make sure you visit batterfans.com for MLS merch and all that other good stuff. So until the next one, have a good one.